we are in the condition we are in the state of ignorance we are in the state of war, in the state of economic depression, in the state of depletion of the resources of our planet because of the greed of psychopaths who thought they could create their own reality. Well, look at the reality they created.
You're listening to Behind the Headlines on the Sott Radio Network. The world for people who think.
Hi, and welcome to Behind the Headlines. I'm Neil Bradley. With me, as always, Joe Quinn.
Hi there.
Today, what happened to Libya? We're interviewing James and Joanne Moriarty. They are a couple, an American couple. They were in Libya when it all went down in flames back in 2011. James and Joanne had visited Libya numerous times since about 2007 when they patented a unique enzyme that cleans oil wells and oil extraction equipment. This was in high demand, of course, in Libya, being an oil-producing country. After signing a joint venture with the Libyan government near Tripoli, they began building a production facility to fulfill contracts for their product. And then, February 2011, the so-called Libyan Revolution begins. Later that year, in May, they were involved in, or led, we'll find out from them soon, an NGO fact-finding commission, which went around Libya watching what was going down through August of that year, 2011. During this time, they were kidnapped and were very lucky to escape with their lives. We'll be getting their story and what happened there. They have presented the information you're about to hear, backed up with extensive documentation at numerous speaking events, not least on radio shows like today's. They've been blacklisted, soft-killed, isolated, and financially ruined. They've put together a DVD, Escape from Al-Qaeda. You should also check out their website, LibyanWarTheTruth.com. A very big welcome to James and Joanne Moriarty.
Thank you so much. We're honored to be on your show today.
Nice to be here.
Great stuff. James and Joanne, it's great. Yeah, it's great to have you here. So let's just take it from the top here. You guys are from Texas, right? Originally or not?
Well, I was originally from Texas, JoAnn from Oregon, but
right.
We had three properties here in the United States, and that was the Woodlands, Texas, which is a suburb of Houston. Yes. And then we had a little ranch farm in Arizona where we grew rattlesnakes and scorpions. And then JoAnn had a big home in the Portland area.
Right. So what caused two people like that to be, although it sounds pretty enterprising actually the way you described your background in the US, what took you to Libya? Why did you end up in Libya? Because I'm pretty sure, relatively speaking, there aren't a lot of Americans in Libya. Not
all. In fact, when we were there, the annual amount of foreigners who were in Libya was about 380,000, and about probably 350,000 of those were involved in the oil and gas industry.
Right.
But beginning before 2000, we started developing our technology, and really what we do is we do a medical grade DNA manipulation of microbes, and then we kill all the living portion off, and then we end up with an enzyme or enzymes that do a lot of neat things to oil or any kind of sticky oil, even chicken fat. And we literally make millions of different products. We've been at it so long that we custom build an enzyme for each activity. Each oil well we rejuvenate, we run a laboratory analysis and build an enzyme. We literally build millions of products. And we treated oil wells in China, Indonesia, Venezuela. We did Superfund cleanup sites in the United States. And what we did, we have a great product there. We don't have any peers, and anytime we compete against Halliburton, Schlumberger, any of the big guys, we always get the contracts. In fact, when they have screwed up oil wells that they could not rejuvenate, they called us to come back in and fix their problems. We never patented the product. We maintained control over our codes, if you would, by doing all the production ourselves. And so, we pumped everything we made back into the business, and we were very, very successful at it. And in the 38 years since Libya was embargoed, they had no new technology. So we knew that they were a prime candidate for us. And we were trying to get agents in Libya before the treaty was ever signed. But after the treaty was signed in 2006, then that opened the door for us and other companies going to Libya. So we actually were in Libya. We arrived 1st of January 2007, and that was through the assistance of a friend of JoAnn's who was a member of the royal family in England who had known Libya and known Gaddafi. And so we were one of the first foreigners, if you would, in Libya. And we went there to try to exploit our business. And we went there the first time, 5 days. We had 4 security guys with us. They were all about the size of a mountain, and they were there to protect us because everything we'd heard about Libya, oh my gosh, those guys were crazy and they were radical and everything. And we really went there just to take a look-see.
Right.
And we'd planned to be there 5 days. We liked them. They liked us. They asked us to stay an extra couple of weeks. They said they wanted to try to arrange a contract for our product. So that was all good. And we ended up every night, meeting with a different minister. And not necessarily about our business. They wanted to know how business was done in the Western world. They wanted to know how contracts were arranged, who negotiated, who was representative. Different minister every night. Really nice people. And they were, naive maybe, but I always call them innocent because they were really not hardcore business people like we had met in other parts of the Middle East or in the Western world.
And also what we found out when we got there, Jimmy had packed a bunch of scarves for me. He thought I was going to have to cover my head. But Libya was the most progressive Muslim country in the world. Gaddafi had emancipated women in the 70s. They were doctors and lawyers and homemakers and entrepreneurs and members of the military, and they spoke their mind. They were in the government.
They were driving their own cars. They owned their own businesses. And it was so different from what we had heard that after 2 days, I sent our security team home. We didn't need them.
Right.
We walked around truly without any security or anything.
And Libyans love Americans. They love, people from outside their country. They're always looking forward to them coming. They come up on the street and say, where are you from? England? Where are you from? And we'd say American. They'd say Hollywood.
Can we help you? Do you like our country? Very friendly.
Very friendly people. Very nice people.
So
they had, go ahead.
Them not being, as James just said, the Libyans, you got the impression they weren't hardcore kind of business people. That has a lot to do with the kind of way Libyan society was structured and had been structured under Gaddafi, right?
Well, yeah, I think it's more tribal.
Okay.
The thing we found out about the Libyans is they are the most non-confrontational people I have ever met in my entire life. They won't start a fight. You can't get them to start a fight. And their culture is, and I'll give you an example. If I run into your car, you're going to forgive me for that accident, but then I'm going to owe you a favor.
Because they don't have insurance.
And next week, next month, next year, you may call me and say, my daughter's getting married. I want you to supply the food for the festival. And I'm obligated to do that. And if I don't do it, then my family must do it. And if my family doesn't do it, then my tribe must step forward and do it.
Uh-huh.
And that's how they settle all their problems. Now, if two people are so hard-headed that they cannot agree immediately to settle their differences, then those two people are put in a jail cell together, and they're fed gruel and camel's milk until they come to an agreement, just like they should have made in the first place. That's their culture. And it was completely different from what we had expected, but they are non-confrontational people. They don't want to fight about anything.
There's a great story. This is just a little side story of a couple tribes that have been warring for years, killing each other and fighting each other. And when Gaddafi actually, that was a bloodless coup in 1969, when 11 of the leaders of the biggest tribes came together and kicked out the old despot king, who was put in there by the United Kingdom. Libya never had a king. That was installed by England, and he was a despot. Libya was the poorest country in Africa at that time. Libyans made an average of 60 dinars a year. Libyan people never owned their own land. They were basically the slaves of the Italians and the occupiers of their land. And as soon as he found out there was going to be a coup, he ran off, because that's who he was. He just ran off. So the 11 tribes, they appointed Gaddafi to be their leader because he was the youngest, one of the youngest. He was the most charismatic. He was highly educated. And so he took over, and he immediately gave all the land to all the Libyans that were working it. That's the first thing he did.
First time they'd ever owned the land they had been working for generations.
Forever. They never owned it before. But I was going to tell you the story of these two tribes, how he handled this. These two tribes were fighting, and in the middle of the night, one night, I don't know if they were police or what they were, showed up and took the people in their pajamas from all the members of each tribe, took them out to the desert, put them in a giant tent, a huge tent. They each had one side, brought all their belongings behind them, gave them to them, brought food, brought everything they needed, and they were told, you two tribes are going to stay in this tent in the desert with food and water. You'll be taken care of until you come to an agreement that you're going to get along. Mm-hmm. And they were out there a year.
Wow.
And now they're very close. They don't fight anymore.
Yeah. Wow, that's interesting.
Sounds like a dictator, doesn't it?
Not really, no.
No, it's so different to what we think of when we hear the word Libya. It's the opposite.
Yeah, tell them how they did education.
Now, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Libya when we found out. From the time that Gaddafi, for all practical purposes, took over until the time we got there, Libya went from being the poorest country, the least developed in Africa, to the number one country. Average salary was $15,700 a year. That was higher than China, higher than India. When you got married, the government gave you a $46,000 gift. Each child begat a $5,000 gift from the government. Your house cost you 10% of your salary for 20 years, and then it was yours. They were building 620,000 new condominiums, at least 2,000 square foot each. Your first car cost you half of dealer invoice. Your utilities were paid, electricity, gas, etc. Gasoline was 44 cents a gallon. Your education was fully paid to whatever extent your brain would support. And while we were there, we knew a young man that was getting his PhD in England. He had a wife and 4 kids. Tuition, fees, books, all paid for, plus his stipend was £4,500 a month. Your hospitalization fully paid, and if you could not get the treatment in Libya, then the government would pay for you to go anywhere in the world to have the treatment paid. They paid your expenses, your travel expenses, and the expenses of a family member to go with you. Nobody in Libya had any debt. The country had no debt. They only spent about 49% of the money they took in to run the government. The rest of the money was distributed out via these activities to the people. The people were very well. 6.5. They lived very well. If you were a bad businessman and you lost your money for whatever reason, and you needed to feed your family, there were storehouses, food storehouses all over the country. You could go up to the storehouse, tell them you needed food, and without any ID or anything, they give you 50 kilos of rice and 50 kilos of flour, 20 kilos of powdered milk, enough money to have an animal slaughtered, 20 kilos of cheese, etc. And they gifted it to you. And if you had to come back 2 or 3 days later, do it again. At Ramadan, which is like their Christmas, any man, woman, and child could go into any bank in Libya and they got a $500 gift from the government. So, the people in Libya had a really good life. There was not ever any intent for those people to have an uprising. That was an absolute false flag operation.
But there was corruption there. There's always corruption. The Turkish mafia was there, and they caused a huge amount of trouble. They were in Misrata. And they actually immigrated from Turkey about 150 years ago, and they feigned that they joined Libyan society and became Muslims and everything, but that was all a lie. They actually became the biggest mafia in Libya, and they were the cause of a huge amount of the problems with a lot of the contracts that were going on.
The reason they were able to become the dominant mafia is because, as I said, the Libyans were non-confrontational, and these people went in there and they physically abused everybody until they got 60% of all the contracts in Libya were let to them without bid or tender. And then they would turn around and sublet these contracts out to foreign contracting companies and builders. And when we went there, that first trip in, we actually ended up signing a contract to rejuvenate 2,500 of their monster wells. That would have required about $600 million to $1 billion worth of just our enzyme. The oil field service charges on top of that would have been probably another billion or $1.5 billion. That's with a B.
Wow.
So we actually hit a home run, first shot out of the barrel. That never happens. And So we then had to go back and find out how Libya did business, because we read the problems that they had with all these foreign contractors that were abandoning projects. There were 150 that had been abandoned at big loss to the foreign developers. And so we started studying the Libyan law and tried to find a Libyan partner, because we do not do the in-field service work. We do our magic in our laboratory and in our production facility, but the treatment of the wells or the cleanup of the pipelines, sludge pits, and all that, that's done by a local company. And we let the local company do the politicking and everything. That's been our modus operandi in China and Indonesia, Venezuela, every place we've ever done business. So we first of all had to find out how the country worked, what the laws were, and then find a good Libyan partner that we could trust to do the quality work that we needed to make our products successful as they have been every place. And it really took us almost 2 years to finally get to the point that we could build companies that would qualify in Libya to be paid directly from the government. In other words, not be a subcontractor under a Libyan partner. And they did have laws that allowed that. Now, it required a plethora of documentation that had to include notary seals. It had to include the Secretary of State of the United States sign every document. It required that the Arab American Chamber of Commerce do all that. Well, we ended up with two corporations, American Petroleum Consortium and Libya American Consortium, that were actually qualified with 11 ministries in Libya as Libyan companies, which meant we could be paid directly from the government without any Libyan involved in it.
And by law in Libya, if you get a contract, the money for that contract has to be put into a bank account, fully funded, before you can start the project.
So I'm a banker. We like that. If the money was there and when we had done our work properly, then we would be able to pencil out our profit on the front end. So, Libya was a place that was really welcoming to foreigners as long as they did the paperwork properly.
Let me say something about the Libyan government, because nobody understands, and we didn't understand about the Libyan government when we were on our fact-finding commission, is when we actually found out exactly how it works. We went to the Al-Gaddafi University and spoke to some of the professors there. The Libyan government has two parts. They have an elected parliament, if you will, elected from all over Libya, that's headed by a prime minister. The prime minister's name was Baghdadi at the time of the war.
Gaddafi was required to step down according to the Treaty of 2006. So Gaddafi had not been the leader of Libya since the treaty.
Since 2006.
He wasn't actually.
No.
Okay. Yep.
No, and understand this is a little confusing, because I always ask the Libyans, I said, but you say he's your leader. They said, yes, he is our leader. You have to understand us. We're a tribal society. He is our spiritual leader, our brother. That's how they refer to him. He's not the leader of the government.
Right.
So
Baghdadi was the
Baghdadi was the prime minister. The other part of the government is the general secretariat of the tribes, and those are appointed tribal leaders of all the tribes that come together. There's about 250 of them, and they are the shadow government. They have the right to remove politicians and do a whole bunch of stuff. So they really had a more pure democracy than anybody in the world.
There are really two houses there. One of them's elected, and one of them is democratically appointed, if you would, through the tribes. And so they really had a counterbalance system with the tribes being the shadow government. And the thing that we saw was that Baghdadi was an appointed. He was the guy that was put in place by the Misrata mafia. Mm-hmm. And of course, all kinds of criminal activities were going on all the time from Misrata. In fact, they had a big building outside of Tripoli, about a 10-story building on the west side of Tripoli. And it kind of stands off by itself, and we drove by it all the time. And I said, "What is it?" They said, "That's the building of Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves."
That's what the Libyans.
That's what they called the Misrata office.
Right.
Yeah.
So they knew they were criminals, and they would go complain to Gaddafi about how these are criminals and they need to do something about it. And he said, "You elected him. Go on the street, throw him out, vote him out."
Take to the street. This is your country.
He said, "I can't do that." And I know this is his mentality, because in 2000, and I think it was in 2010, the European community gathered up 60 billion euros to donate to the third world countries in Africa. Union. And they appointed Gaddafi as the keeper of those funds. And he was interviewed there in France by one of your reporters, and the reporter said, well, this is not much money for all of Africa. And Gaddafi said, you're not going to ever help Africa by giving them money. You're going to help Africa by training them to work and training them to be productive themselves. Mm-hmm. So again, sounds like a hell dictator.
We did not ever meet Gaddafi. We didn't know him. We did business more with the tribes. But I have to tell you, I met Gaddafi through the literally thousands and thousands of Libyans we met when we were there on the fact-finding commission, through the hearts and minds of the people of Libya. That's where we met him. Mm-hmm. I have to say that anything I say about him came from those people, not from him.
Right. And he was generally loved.
Sure.
Yes.
About 85% fully supported him. There had always been this radical niche on the far east side around Derna of radicals. I think the gene puddle over there was probably limited. And so those guys were a lot of psychopaths and a lot of nutters. That
they were in exile, most of them, because they couldn't come back. Libya did not allow any radical Islam inside the country, period.
Right. In fact, if you had a beard and a mustache, you probably couldn't get a job and definitely would not be elevated.
Yeah, that was clear right after 9/11. I mean, Gaddafi was first and foremost among the Middle Eastern countries to get behind the war on terror. He's saying, yeah, I know there are extremists. Look what we did. We lock them up.
Yeah.
Let me give you better than that. In the first week of February 2011, the United States Department of Defense declared that Gaddafi and Libya were the strongest allies in the war against terrorism. Right. Because Gaddafi had been actively trying to help clear the world of these radical psychopaths. He was the first one that went to the UN and said that Al-Qaeda is a growing threat and has to be dealt with. And, of course, 2 weeks after the Department of Defense gave him this big award, he was then declared the worst guy that ever drew a breath in the media.
So you have to understand, Gaddafi did none of those terrorist acts like Lockerbie and all those. He was not, Libya was not involved in any of those. How could he hate terrorism and then be a terrorist? It doesn't even make any sense.
Right. But those terror attacks that that Libya was accused of, I mean, apart from Lockerbie, which I think there's enough evidence now to show that was a completely fabricated case against Libya. I mean, there's more.
CIA.
Right, that it was more or less the CIA that was involved in blowing that plane up. But there was a previous one, the U.S. bombing of
German.
Was Benghazi and Tripoli maybe in 1986 because of the Berlin disco bombing in August of that or earlier that year.
That's also been proven to be a false flag.
Yeah,
so was
the
the murder of that police officer outside the Libyan embassy. That was not done by Libya.
That was
the reason Gaddafi paid those fines is to get back in the mainstream. The oil production in Libya at the time that the embargoes took place, Libya was producing 3.7 million barrels of oil a day. When we went into Libya in 2011, it was less than 1 million barrels of oil a day, and that was because known technology had been allowed into the country to help them get their production up.
Yeah, there was tremendous pressure from the Libyan people and from Gaddafi's advisors for him to do that. Just forget it.
So
he
bought off. He bought off the complaints in order to get the country back into the world market.
And that's why we see him meeting Tony Blair, Nicolas Sarkozy. Prior to all this going down, he was basically burying the hatchet by taking the blame and paying up, even though he wasn't responsible.
He gave Sarkozy $50 million for his campaign when he was elected.
Right. And Sarkozy turned around and was the lead in killing him.
He also gave $10 million to Barack Obama's uncle, gave $50 million to Barack Obama when he was running for president. And, of course, that helped finance the knife in his back.
The scurrilousness of, I mean, these people are just scumbags. I mean, you mentioned that about Obama getting money from Gaddafi and Sarkozy getting $50 million for his presidential election campaign, and he got elected. And Sarkozy's was in court basically over taking campaign funds from. But I mean, what kind of person do you have to be to do that? I mean, you take $50 million from Gaddafi, and a couple of years later, you're
make up
kind
a bunch
of
of lies and have killed.
Yeah. Well, you got to get to who's really pulling the strings. You know, these are just puppets.
Right.
the Zionists, the bankers, the guys that own all this, and I'm gonna get into now why Libya was blown up.
Please do.
Right, but I just wanted to say that when I mentioned the U.S. bombing of Libya in 1986, because supposedly Libya was accused of blowing up a German discotheque in 1986. Like James just said, there is evidence already, and it's actually been on in 1998. It was on a German TV show, ZDF television. They had a show on it, and they laid out the evidence that it was the CIA and Mossad who were basically the guys who were involved in that. These were effectively CIA and Mossad agents who were directly involved in the blowing up of that discotheque. They blamed it on Libya.
Yes, sir, but those two entities are responsible for all these false flag operations forever.
But
the reason you don't hit it because there's not enough guys like you out there telling the truth.
Right, and the Israeli involvement, I think, was because Gaddafi was supporting the Palestinians, right? Pissed off the Israelis.
No, they've been involved in all the false flag operations to support the Zionists, and the Zionists have hijacked the Jewish religion.
Right.
But the Zionists are out to take over the world, and there's 85 people that own 70% of everything in the world.
They wanted a military base in the Green Mountain part of Libya. We have the actual document signed. It came from the tribe security, signed by the Mossad with the so-called rebels, which was Al-Qaeda and NTC, that they would, if the Mossad would arm and train them and help them, then they would give them an area to build a Israel military base in the Green Mountain area of Libya.
That was before 2000. That was during 2010, a long time before Arab Spring.
Right.
But the reason JoAnn and I are authorities is we had been in Libya 17 times from January 2007 until February of 2011.
August 2011.
Well, we've been there 17 times. We were there never less than 30 days. Several times we were there more than 3 months at a time. We've been all over the country. And successively, we signed additional contracts to do all kinds of activities in Libya. So we were really business people that were fully exploiting our opportunities in Libya, but we got to know the Libyan people. We travel all over the country. We travel more in Libya than Libyans did.
We love the country. It's a beautiful country.
Right.
Parts of the desert has like the Jewel Lakes, and it's a really strikingly beautiful country.
Better and more pristine Roman ruins than you'll ever see in Rome or Greece or any place.
And the Libyan people are so friendly that it makes it very nice and easy to move around.
Mm-hmm.
But I was there in January of 2000. I arrived January 1st, 2011. I signed my joint venture contract. It was actually with the Social Security Investment Fund of John Zur. There were 6 investment funds in Libya. That was the littlest one at $16 billion. The biggest one was $33 billion for the Tripoli employees. But the reason that was the perfect partner for us is that the beneficiaries of that fund were all the retired workers from the oil and gas industry, the National Oil Company, the oil producers, the infield service people. So it gave us the best political muscle we could ever have. Great partnership with them. And then 2 days later, I signed the contract to locate our production facility in a new free zone that was being built near the Tunisian border. I then ordered in all the materials, which are ceramic lined stainless steel. Our entire plant is ceramic lined stainless steel equipment because we grow the microbes in the equivalent of a beer batter, which of course is real caustic.
Mm-hmm.
And then I brought in enough feedstocks to supply that plant for 2 years. So we had, between the cash we put in the banks there and that facility, we had over $200 million in Libya. And I left there on the 8th of February, 2011. Less than 10 days later, supposedly, the revolution started. But I'll tell you something strange about that revolution. Supposedly it was spontaneous. But on the same day, within an hour of each other, 18 police stations were firebombed with cars.
In different cities.
In different cities all over the country. Mm-hmm. Then the stations were attacked. Everybody in there was killed. They took the guns and everything out. The next thing they did, within a couple hours, they took bulldozers, knocked down the fencing of military weapon storage places. they had the right kind of a hook on the front of the bulldozer to drag the tanks out of there. Then they turned the turrets around and started firing on the military. So this was an absolute military operation from day one. And for anybody to say it was a spontaneous uprising, absolute bald-faced lie.
Mm-hmm.
The next thing that happened that was so unusual, first time in history that a bunch of rebels start a revolution in a country, and 6 days after the revolution starts, they opened up a central bank in Benghazi. Immediately, that central bank was recognized, and all the money that Libya had in the Federal Reserve System and in Euroclear was released to that central bank. Now, that was extensive money. Libya had $241 billion in cash and cash equivalents in the Federal Reserve System. They had 150 billion euros in Euroclear. All these deposits were required for Libya to be accepted back into the international community. Libya also had 39 billion in cash in the country. They had 179 tons of gold, 2,000 tons of silver. They had lots of tons of every other rare earth, heavy earth, and precious metal that you can imagine. So Libya was a very, very wealthy country, and they had no debt. And so it was really easy for the Zionists to pick on Libya and say, well, gosh, we need to blow them up anyhow, and this will be a hell of a profit center for us. All that has disappeared. And you need to remember there were only 6 to 6.5 million Libyans in the whole country. Country was the 7th largest footprint in Africa, 17th largest country in the world, and about number 5 in recoverable reserves of oil and gas. Now then, why did Libya get blown up? There was 3 real reasons. First one was the United States is bound and determined to have a war with China. And Africa, of course, is the continent with the most natural resources of any place. So the United States has set up AFRICOM, which is military control of Africa, in order to keep the Chinese away from those natural resources.
Yeah.
Libya, South Africa, and 6 other countries told the United States they'd go pound sand because they were never going to give up military control of their country. So, of course, the United States says, well, hell, we need to get rid of Libya. It's the strongest country because we've got to have military control of Africa. So the United States is ready to knock them off for that reason. Second, Gaddafi was a real bright guy, and he didn't like any of the banks at all. Didn't like any of the foreign banks. When JoAnn and I first went in there, we planned to be there 5 days, had some money. Staying there another 2 weeks required we needed more cash. No credit cards, nothing. Their only international bank was Western Union. We loved that because that meant there were no international banks there. We could do business there. So Gaddafi didn't like international banks. So whenever he retired, he started to develop the African Bank. It's domiciled in the Comore Islands. It has a gold-backed dinar for the continent of Africa. Every Arab country had signed up as members. Half of Africa had signed up as members. So the Zionists had to blow up Libya and get rid of the African Bank because a gold-backed currency with the continent of Africa behind it would have destroyed the toilet paper bankers. They couldn't sell their crap paper when there was a real currency over here in competition with them. So the Zionists, of course, wanted to get rid of Gaddafi in order to get rid of the African Bank. And then the third thing was the European Union and the United States. Gaddafi and the country of Africa had been sanctioned for 38 years, which had cost them I don't know how much money. In addition to that, Gaddafi was a great big African Union guy, and so he had gone to all the African countries and gathered up all the treaties that had been violated by all the imperialist countries that had been in Africa, and they put a dollar number on all those violations of those treaties, and a class action suit was brought against the United States and all the European countries that had been in Africa. It was taken to international court. The total damages asked for was in excess of $7 trillion.
Wow.
And as the attorney said, that lawsuit had legs. So, of course, Europeans, Greece and France and Germany, all of them were near bankrupt anyhow. They couldn't afford to pay out anything. So, of course, they signed on to get rid of Libya because they needed that stopped. So those are the 3 main reasons why Libya was the target it was. And this attack was planned years in advance. In fact, on our DVD, if you saw the interview with Dennis Kucinich, Dennis Kucinich outed the planned invasion of Libya. They had been planning it for years, and then the war games were played in 2010 for the attack on Libya. It didn't say Libya, but it said a oil-rich North African dictatorship, and there'd be 11 military ships taken into the Mediterranean. That's how many went in there. A no-fly zone would be established. They'd use local distance and bring in mercenaries as necessary. That was done. And it was to start, I think, on the 17th of March was the date they had planned that whole thing to start. It actually started a month before on the 18th of February. So this was no Arab Spring. This was no revolution. This was an absolute coup d'etat. It was planned years in advance. It was executed. And the fact that they destroyed Libya, good riddance, because as the Zionists say, acceptable collateral damage. And cause of the U.S., UN, and NATO, 600,000 Libyans have been killed, men, women, and children. 2 million live in exile. Of the 3 million left in Libya, 1 million of them are homeless. The other 2 million live in fear. The country is owned and operated by Muslim Brotherhood, Al-Qaeda, Ansar al-Sharia, and now ISIS. And the U.S. is continuing to support ISIS every single day in Libya. They're bringing military, more mercenaries and everything into Libya every day.
There's 128 mass graves in Libya. But let's go back and tell how we got there.
Yeah.
We in April of 2011, we were putting out information, and we put out some articles that we got information from
We
Libya.
paid to have them published.
Yeah, about what was happening in Libya. Bishop Martinelli wrote an article in the Catholic Digest. He was the Catholic prelate there. That they were bombing hospitals, that women were having miscarriages at an alarming rate, that people were having heart attacks. He wrote a really nice article. We published it, or we tried to. They wouldn't let us publish it. They said
it wasn't covered by
that's
anybody.
Not a good enough source, they said. Anyway, we were contacted by email by a NGO fact-finding commission group put together by it's a World Youth Organization for Peace, I think. And they have 2 billion members. They're in Africa and India and all over. And they contacted us and asked us if we would please head a fact-finding commission. That we don't know how they got our name, but we were recommended by somebody. And so we went on that fact-finding commission. We went to England first, and we were joined by British people and French people and Italians and some Pakistanis and some people from Kenya. And we all went on this fact-finding commission. The no-fly zone was in place, so we had to fly into Tunisia, and we were driven into Tripoli.
And that was first week in May, and we ended up being trapped inside Tripoli for 100 days. And during that time, one of the conditions we laid on the invite was that we got to go anywhere in Libya and verify for ourselves if these atrocities were actually being committed by the Libyan government. If they were, we were going to tell the story, and if they weren't, then we would tell that story. And we were given open license to go any place. We paid all our own expenses. We rented our own vehicles. We paid our hotel. All that was at our nickel. And we ended up being there much longer than we planned to be. But the road between Tripoli and Tunisia was closed due to bombing shortly after we got into Tripoli. And in Tripoli, there wasn't anything going on. They bombed every night. But the people there was no fighting in the streets because the Libyan people, especially those in Tripoli, had no fight with their government at all. And so we were safe inside Tripoli.
We were taken to bomb sites. We interviewed a whole lot of people who had great atrocities, great war crimes were done to this country. You can't imagine what was done to this country. 250,000 mercenaries were brought in to take over the country. Al-Qaeda, they were all mostly radical. Some were Blackwater. There was Blackwater there. They were from some other countries. They were trained.
250,000. Where'd they get
yes.
that from?
All over. The CIA's got training centers everywhere.
A lot of them came from Afghanistan. They'd be fighting the USA the week before, and they were brought in by the U.S. and armed by the U.S. and put into. There's even articles written.
They're from Somalia. They're from Tunisia.
Yemen,
they're from
Algeria, Egypt. They came from all those countries, armed and trained and paid mercenaries. And then there were a whole lot of Blackwater there, CIA, they were all there.
But the first $1 billion was transferred into their central bank, came from Saudi Arabia, and the net amount deposited into that bank was, I think, $935 million. The banks, of course, had to take out their fees. And that almost $1 billion was dispersed out the first week to mercenaries.
A lot of Qatar played a big role in this. The people that were killed in Benghazi that was blamed on Gaddafi, they said Gaddafi snipers were killing people on the streets. Those were two people that weren't even Libyans in the street, and they were killed by Qatar snipers. That's a known fact now. Libyans all know that. Mm-hmm. So it was 100% false flag. But we interviewed some young men who were at the very start of it, and how
first day of the fighting.
Yeah, how they made them change their Libyan uniform into normal clothes, and they were killed, and they were filmed and said it was Gaddafi who killed them, that these were rebels.
Yeah, but the important part about that is the two entities that were there embedded with the rebels from day one, knowing everything was going on, was Al Arabiya and Al Jazeera TV, and they were there with Al-Qaeda from day one. They filmed the Libyan soldiers being required to take off their uniforms and put on street clothes. They filmed them being massacred by Al-Qaeda, and then turn around and put out the news that it was the Libyan soldiers that killed these guys and chopped off their heads, etc. So the lies from the paid-for media began day one. Al Jazeera and Al Arabiya were embedded. Now, we know that because the first 13 guys that were captured and killed, one of them, he was a Libyan. One of them was shot through the head twice and once in the shoulder, and they dumped all these bodies on a truck to take them out to the desert. And a couple of miles more, they'd been killed. Somebody standing on the side of the road, seeing these truckload of bodies go by, saw this one body moving. They stopped the truck. The guy was still alive. They took him out of the truck, smuggled him up their apartment, and then got him into a hospital in Benghazi. They removed one of the bullets there in his brain. He was in such bad shape they couldn't remove the other one. The Al-Qaeda found out he was still alive. They tried to poison him several times while he was in the hospital. The good Libyans got him smuggled out of there, got him in an airplane, got him to Tunisia. There he had the other bullet from his brain removed, had his shoulder rebuilt. And the second day he arrived back in Libya with his family, we were asked to come over there and interview him. And he spoke in a kind of a stilted speech, but over a 2 or 2.5 hour period, sitting under a tree in very nice Zawiya, he told us the whole story.
And we're probably the only people who have that on tape.
We got several hundred.
This guy?
He was one of the Libyan soldiers who was over there trying to protect the airport from the rebels in Benghazi on the first day of the uprising.
This was a story they played over and over and over on the media, saying this is what Gaddafi does to people. And it was set up, and it was a complete lie because it was the other way around. And this guy was an eyewitness. He was there, and he survived.
Mm-hmm. And the fact that the media was embedded with them from day one on the lies is the telling tale. But we found out that all the media in Libya, were agencies from someplace, and they were even calling it. They would ask to go to a military place that had been bombed, and then they would call in the airstrikes.
They did it at radio stations. They did a lot of places.
And so finally, the Libyan government would not allow the media to go out into the field where they could call in strikes because they were all CIA, whatever. And when we were asking the Libyan security about that, I said, how in the world? I said, this guy's over there calling in latitude and longitude on his cell phone. He said, yeah, we know that. But he said, they're here. What are we going to do about it? I said, well, you all need to get on the offensive, and you need to have your own public relations campaign to tell the truth. And this is how faithful the Libyan people are. They said, the truth and our faith will save us, our God. Now, I said, not when you've got this big gorilla blowing you up. Yeah. And on that vein, the United States directed 60,000 bombing sorties into Libya from March of 2011 through October of 2011, 60,000 bombing sorties. They dropped more bombs than were dropped in entire World War II on this little country. And they used every kind of nasty bomb.
Depleted uranium.
They used depleted uranium shells exclusively. They use fuel-air explosives, which is a poor man's nuclear weapon. They use that on Bani Walid and on Sirte because those two towns would not give up under any circumstances. And so the war crimes and the atrocities committed are unbelievable.
They bombed schools, they bombed hospitals, they bombed food supplies, they bombed water supplies, they bombed
Water
roads,
treatment
they bombed
plants.
houses, they bombed apartment buildings, they bombed date palm orchards.
School buses.
You can't imagine. They bombed the Children's Center, which was a UNESCO or whatever they call it. It was a building on the antique building, where they protect these because they're antiques. The Libyan government or people had the highest, if not the highest, one of the highest rate of child survival in the world.
100% inoculation, the best prenatal and postnatal care in the world, and all those records were in this beautiful antique building, then rebuilt. And the UN representative was there in the basement of that building going through all these records for hours. He left, and 30 minutes later, a bunker buster bomb hit that building, destroyed it completely, and all the records gone. So the Libya's ability to prove what a good humanitarian place it was destroyed.
That was a place where they had adults that were hurt or injured, and they needed rehab, and they had also for mentally challenged people. They had all kinds of stuff going on in that building, but they just blew it up. You can't imagine what they were doing. They did their bombings at night to stress out everybody.
They started about 2:00 and went till 6:30 in the morning every night.
And they brought in helicopters from time to time, and you just hear the cannons going through the streets. Just mow down people when they felt like it.
Now this is under the only thing that was ever authorized was a no-fly zone to protect the innocents.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that no-fly zone, according to the U.S. pilots that set it up, after 2.5 days, they said the no-fly zone has been completely established, and Libya could not get a mosquito in the air. Yet, 3 weeks after the no-fly zone was established, Chris Stevens, who was the gun runner to the rebels, delivered 20,000 man-pad and shoulder-mounted, shoulder-to-air rockets to Al-Qaeda and Muslim Brotherhood in Libya. 20,000 of them. This is after the no-fly zone had been established. And there was no reason for that at all. Well, that year, sometime later, that's what bit Chris Stevens and caused them to have him assassinated. Because the rest of the countries around Libya complained to UN and NATO and said, Libya is like a sieve, and there are weapons coming out of Libya through our countries. We can't stop it. Y'all have to do something about it. They're coming out with all kinds of weapons and
all
rockets
Gaddafi,
and everything.
all the weapons that the Libyan army had been stolen, too.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was coming out of there. The president of Chad and Yemen and all these people said, not Yemen, Niger. They said, you've got to stop this.
Yeah.
So there was pressure put on the United States to get these damn rockets back because the rest of the world is saying, we cannot afford to have our commercial liners shot down with all these rockets that you gave to these psychopaths.
Do you think that, like you said, that they had established a no-fly zone, but they were bringing in anti-aircraft missiles, manpads and stuff, and Chris Stevens was part of it? Do you think they were bringing that in, obviously there was no air threat in Libya, but they were bringing it in so that they could later do what they did, which is basically send them over to the so-called rebels in Syria?
Of course,
absolutely.
Of course, because Chris Stevens was funneling all the weapons to Syria.
He was funneling mercenaries that were being trained in Libya later, too.
There were 28.
There were 28.
He was assassinated.
By who?
The proof that we brought forward was Morsi was the coordinator. It was Ansar al-Sharia, but Muslim Brotherhood. But I'm pretty sure that everybody in Washington D.C. knew about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because here's the thing that we know. 6 weeks before it ever happened, we were told by the Libyan tribes that one of the generals that was embedded with Muslim Brotherhood and Al-Qaeda, he said they are planning attacks on U.S. Soil in Libya, in Yemen, etc. It's going to happen on 9/11. And we said, what do you mean U.S. soil? And he said, U.S. soil here in Libya and in Yemen, your U.S. soil. Well, that has to be the embassies, And there was a small attack on the Tripoli embassy, but we tried to tell this to everybody we could in Washington, D.C. I've got to tell you, Joanne's dialing finger is a digit shorter than it used to be from calling every single office, every government agency, every politician in Washington, D.C., Texas, Oklahoma, everybody, trying to listen to us, tell our government how wrong-footed we were in supporting Al-Qaeda and Muslim Brotherhood. You know, we were so ignorant or stupid or naive or whatever, we thought we were trying to fight a mutual enemy.
You thought
we didn't realize
you thought it was a mistake they were making.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. And we figured when the government found out how wrong-footed they were that they would change it, you know.
You guys must have had your eyes open since then.
Oh yeah,
man.
Let me tell you.
So, you know, when they were telling us about Benghazi, we couldn't get anybody to listen to us.
When Benghazi was happening, you know, we're the official spokesperson for the tribes of Libya because they don't have any mouth in the world, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they trust us because we sat with them while blood ran in the streets in their country. They called us at the night that it was happening at the embassy. One of our tribal representatives called and he said, it's top urgent. He said, the men that killed your ambassador are at this hospital in Benghazi right now. They're at this hospital. And he said, tell your intelligence people, tell them to get the drones over there. Tell them to get somebody over there. This is where they all ran off to here. This is where they are. Okay. I have no one to tell. You know, you can't just, the people, even the intelligence agencies I was talking to, they don't answer their phone after 5, you know, they're 9 to 5. So, the next call was about 12 hours later. What was it? 2 hours later?
Yeah, about 2 hours later.
2 hours later, he said, okay, these guys have now shaved all their beards, put on Western clothes, and they're in fancy cars heading into Egypt.
SUVs. One was an Audi, one was a Chevrolet, or maybe two of them were Chevrolet, and they're on this road going between Benghazi. They're headed to Cairo. That road's real easy to follow. He said, you can knock them out. These are the guys that killed your ambassador. Of course, nobody here to tell or that would listen. Mm-hmm. And so then later on we found out that the guy that served dinner to Chris Stevens and the ambassador from Turkey that night in that mansion, and incidentally, for the world to know, that was never anything but a safe house.
CIA.
It was never a consulate. It was never an embassy. It was never intended to be that.
Never had a U.S. flag on it.
Never had a U.S. flag. Not one car that was there ever had an ambassador or political plate. They all had Libyan license plates.
Libya only has one authorized U.S. embassy. It's in Tripoli.
Mm-hmm.
So anybody saying it was an embassy, that was not true. But the night the fighting started, the man that served dinner to Stevens and the representative from Turkey, that servant, if you would, was one of the spies for the Libyan tribes. And he understands English very well.
Mm-hmm.
And the discussion they were having at dinner was Chris Stevens was pleading with this Turkish representative to talk to Erdogan, who's the leader of Turkey, to use his influence to get those 20,000 rockets back. And he said, we will pay handsomely, whatever it takes to get those back. We've got to get them back. They're causing us political problems. And the Turkish representative, for all practical purposes, told him to pound sand. They finished dinner. The Turk left that mansion, was put in a fast vehicle, driven to the military airport in Benghazi, and flown by military aircraft back to Turkey. When the plane sat down on the ground in Turkey, that's when the three coordinators of the attack on that mansion called in the attack. And we know the names, addresses, and phone number of those three guys because their families gave them up. They were ashamed of them. And in January, after that attack happened, the U.S. Secretary of State's Department offered a $10 million reward for the information leading to the arrest of the coordinators of that attack on the house in Benghazi. We offered to give it to them free.
Mm-hmm.
They have not taken it. Trey Gowdy, who is supposedly running this big official investigation, we tried to give it to him. He didn't want it. Isa, who is another big investigator on the other side, Louis Gohmert, who is a Texas fire and brimstone guy, all these politicians that claim to be investigating Benghazi don't want that information.
Well,
in addition to that, of all the people that were interviewed in Libya, the only ones ever interviewed by anybody in the United States were employees of the U.S. government. Not one non-U.S. government employee was ever interviewed. So the truth about Benghazi is being buried. The U.S. doesn't, the politicians here don't want to know about it.
Well, we have a tribal leader who his son lived across from that compound, and he's an eyewitness to what happened to it. He's been interviewed on a couple of radio shows, and he said that when they went in there, he said that the guys in the streets were not Libyans. He said they had a different accent, maybe Egyptian. He didn't know. They were dressed in strange clothes. And he was there. He said, "Are you here to kill us?" And he said the man told him, "No, we're not here to kill Libyans today. We're here to kill Americans." And
but before that, he was in the equivalent of a convenience store, a block away from his house when the first gunshots were fired. He jumped in his car and he drove back to his house. And while he was driving back, 2 cars exited that compound where the mansion was. 2 cars at high speed.
And he said Chris Stevens wasn't in either one. He said after they blew up the place, he said they invited him to go in, and he said, "Those are the people. You don't say, no, I'm not going to go with you." He said, "You just do whatever they tell you," because he said they'll kill you in a minute. He said they went in, the looters had been there, and it was dark inside. He said there was a body on the floor somewhere. Nobody could see the face or anything. It was dark, and they were abusing the body, kicking it and urinating on it and stuff. And he said when they finally drug it out, you could see it was Chris Stevens. He said, but I have to tell you, he said it's very obvious to him and to other people that Chris Stevens was dead probably long before the actual attack started. So he said that would be my opinion. That's what he told me. But, you have to understand that dead men tell no tales.
Evidently, they have windows that have been equipped as slides, chutes for people to jump on the chute, and you end up, and they've got cars right there to make an escape in the event of an attack. And the fact that Chris Stevens was not the first one down the chute is a question that needs to be asked. The fact that those 2 cars left at high speed without him in there, another question to be asked.
So the question here for me then is there any suggestion of U.S. participation in the death of Chris Stevens?
Well, I guess so. How can you come to any other conclusion? The people that could give the order gave an order to stand down, and even that they're lying about.
But why would they want to get rid of Chris Stevens, the U.S. government?
Dead men tell no tales. Those 20,000 rockers are going to come back and bite the U.S. in the ass.
Chris Stevens was CIA before he became an ambassador.
Right.
He was the one who was in Libya, de-arming Libya from any nuclear weapons they had. He also was the gun runner for the rebels into Libya. He then became the gun runner and the mercenary runner into Syria. He was working with Morsi. He was working with Egypt and the Muslim Brotherhood. And Morsi was a 30-year friend of Hillary Clinton and her husband.
Right. So the suggestion then is that Chris Stevens couldn't be trusted.
No, they don't. Chris Stevens knew too much. Put someone in a situation, they may talk.
Right. But really, a friend of mine is a capital offense attorney. And I said, golly, with your personality, how in the world could you do that? And she said, it's the easiest kind of law to practice because the key witness is always missing. Mm-hmm. So in this case, they can say whatever they want to about what Chris Stevens did or didn't do, and what's he going to do? He can't defend himself.
Right.
But these 20,000, can you imagine Muslim Brotherhood and Al-Qaeda and ISIS shooting down 20,000 commercial airplanes all over the world?
Yeah.
Well, let's get back to Tripoli during the war. I'd like to give a little bit more on that if we could.
Yeah, just as an introduction to that, I just wanted to ask the question about, you gave the figure of 600,000 dead. Is that a direct result of the NATO bombing?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Because I haven't been able to find any figures anywhere in the mainstream media.
Oh, there you go. You gave the key word, the mainstream media, because they're lying like everything. The NATO went in and did an investigation, said there were 60,000 killed or something. No, there were 100,000 the first month. There's 600,000 are the number of Libyans that are dead and missing. There are 128 mass graves in Libya, mostly full of blacks. There was genocide begun on all black Libyans the first week of this uprising, and Al-Qaeda and Muslim Brotherhood swore they were going to cleanse the country of all blacks. And this came from the tribes. It's real hard for the tribes to give up that number because, the families that are still holding out, well, we haven't heard from our son in 4 years, but maybe he's alive.
Also, there's maybe 40,000 at least illegally imprisoned and being tortured. Probably 20,000 have at least been tortured to death. in Misrata. Most of them are held. Their crime is that they did not support the revolution. And a lot of the good leaders are there, like Abu Zaid Dorda are there for no reason. He never broke any laws. They threw him out of a third-story window as a 60-year-old man, broke both his legs, never gave him medical care. I mean, this is the crimes that went on there, the war crimes. They embargoed Tripoli from food and medicine and gasoline and water. You can't do that. That's against all Geneva Conventions.
In the main prison in Misrata, there were so many dead bodies rotting and everything that they had to abandon that place. And that's when Doctors Without Borders abandoned them, and UNICEF and these other, they said, we can't go in there. They're continuing to torture people to death. And there were so many dead and rotting bodies that it was such a health hazard, they abandoned that. They think there's as many as 28,000 dead inside that prison. But we know they were doing that because when we were captured by Al-Qaeda, we were taken to their torture center, which was really the Radisson Hotel.
How that started.
Yeah,
well,
how did that happen?
Okay. After Tripoli was invaded, the tribes, one night we were sitting in the hotel with Sheikh Ali Al-Akwel, who was head of all the tribes, and he had asked us to come and meet with him and have tea. And when we were sitting there, another tribal leader brought over a big envelope, 2 or 3 inches thick, and he tapped it and he said, "This is our new constitution." That had been agreed to be written by all the tribes. 100% of the tribes had agreed to that in May. First time in 100 years where they had 100% agreement on anything.
This was to be in compliance with whatever the UN needed.
And this was in August, about August 25th, I think.
No, about the 20th.
20th, okay. Yeah. And as soon as that Constitution was finished, then that would have taken all the wind out of the sails of the U.S., UN, NATO, etc., because a Constitution would have been brought forward for all Libyans to vote yay or nay. So the invasion of Tripoli started about 3 days later. And
they just started bombing. I mean, day and night bombing, and then they started bringing in their black helicopters off to see those. I don't know if they were Apache, what they were, with their cannons blaring. And the first hour, they killed 1,300 people on the streets.
Now, we're eyewitnesses of that.
5,000.
We were on the 21st floor of the Corinthia Hotel looking out over the Mediterranean, and we heard this noise, and we could see 2 of these helicopters coming in real low off the water with their mini cannons blaring. We could hear the third one, and they were firing at everything in the street. And as JoAnn said, they killed 1,300 and wounded 5,000 in the first hour of the attack on Tripoli. And they were attacking mainly the area around the port.
They were just attacking civilian people. There wasn't any army there fighting. There was no army. Then they started bringing in shiploads of these mercenaries in these little pickup trucks with anti-aircraft guns on the back. They were 4-door pickups, if you would. All of them had some kind of big armament on the back, and they were a stream nonstop coming out of the port, right on the road, right in front of our hotel, nonstop for over a day. And our hotel was the only one that had food and electricity still operating. And when we knew we had to get out of there, because there was no attempt by the U.S. government, and they knew we were there to help us in any way when we tried to. My daughter had been calling the State Department day in and day out. They no reply, nothing.
When we requested help, we never even got an answer. And so finally, the one day there was fighting inside the hotel. There was gunfire in the lobby. We went up to our room, locked the door. The front desk called and they said, "There's an assassin on your floor.
Don't open your door.
Don't open your door for any reason. Barricade it." And so then we knew we had to get out of there. The Russian ambassador called, I guess it was that afternoon, and he talked to JoAnn and he said, "I know you're not."
He knew us.
Yeah, he knew us. He said, "I know you're not going to get any help from your government, but the government of Malta is sending over a rescue ship. They've already sent it over. And
pick up the dignitaries.
I've added your names to the list, so you've got 2 spots on that ship." And so we were down in the lobby, and we were talking to people there, and a man approached us, good-looking, tall, blonde-headed guy. His name is Tony Hay. He's the FIFA coach from Germany in Libya. And he said, "Are you all Americans?" We said, "Yes." "Are you going to get out of here?" "We're going to try." He said, "Can I go with you?" And we said, "Okay." Next, the the sister of the president of Mauritania approached us. We had met her. We didn't know who she was, except that she was in Libya trying to help the Libyans. She said, do you have any way to get out here? And we told her about the rescue ship. She said, can I go with you? So we added her to the list. Then a Bahraini prince approached us. He had with him a ne'er-do-well from Texas who was trying to sell guns to anybody that'd buy them. And we added those two guys. And then one of the workers from the hotel wanted to try to get out too. So JoAnn called the ambassador back and said, can you add 5 more names to the list? Which he did.
And then
confirmed it by fax to the hotel.
The prime minister's his aide, the lady, she sent me an email and confirmed everybody that was on the list and gave us her phone number so we could call her to find out where the ship was.
And then we talked the hotel into loaning us their van, and the van she put the gal that was running the hotel put 2 Libyans, one as driver and one as shotgun, to drive us, and they were instructed to tell anybody at these checkpoints, because there were Al-Qaeda and Muslim Brotherhood checkpoints about every 100 meters up and down all the roads.
It was a complete war zone.
And so they were to tell these Al-Qaeda that we were reporters, newspaper people. And she said that way you won't get any trouble because the reporters have been lying for them forever, so they'll probably let you through.
They knew you.
So
yeah. If you were reporters, they knew you'd be on their side.
Exactly.
Right.
So we got to the first one. They tell this story. These guys, Allah Akbar, shoot their AK-47 in the air. Let us go to the next one. And I mean, they're every 100 meters. And we're trying to get directions from this aide to the Prime Minister of Malta about where the ship is. And we go 42 miles east on the coast highway. Imagine every little bit Al-Qaeda. And we got all the way down there to the end. And she said, no, it's back at the port in Tripoli. So we turned around and went all the way back, and then got back, and there was nothing in the port. We went into the port, nothing there. We came back out, and we started back in. She said, it's at a little fishing village about so-and-so and so-and-so. And the driver said, yeah, that's right back where we were, 42 miles out there. So we go all the way back, and when we get there, we can't find any rescue ship. And so we stopped to ask one of the guys that looked kind of an official at one of those stop points, and he said, oh yeah, he said, I'm from this village. He said, we'll go in and we'll help you find it. So they took us into this little village, and the streets kept getting smaller and smaller. Then we turned down an alleyway, and it's so narrow that you can't open the doors, and when it finally opens up, it's at a mosque. And I've got to tell you, all the atrocities were being committed in mosques.
The rape of the women.
When they captured anybody, they'd take them to a mosque. They were boiling men in oil and water. They were raping women. They were using the mosques as their
alcohol,
center for abuses. So when we got to this mosque, we knew we were finished. Thank God those were friendly people. They offered us water. They tried to help us. Now, we'd been in this van by that time 12 hours. And so they said, no, we'll take you back. We know right where it is. And so they took us back, twisty-turny out of this little town to this fishing camp, if you would. And we're on a satellite phone talking to Malta. She's telling us where we should be. That's where we are. What she didn't tell us is that Al-Qaeda had fired on the ship, and it was moored 3 miles out, was not allowed to come in. And what they'd sent in was 2 tugboats that were sitting there with their engines running, with all their lights and everything out, and they weren't speaking to anybody. We were within 100 yards of them, and we didn't see them, and they didn't, and they didn't motion to us. So we finally gave up and went all the way back in. We went into the port of Tripoli again, and this time they held us in the port for about an hour, and then 50 or more of these little cars came in from all directions, 3 or 4 of these bearded bastards, pardon my French, and all of them had their AK-47s. They pulled up around us, put their guns right in our face, and the big, tall, hard-looking guy, he said, your game is up. We know who you are. And he had a list with our names on it. And they took us then to their torture center, which was the Radisson Blue Hotel. It had no electricity or lights. They were holding us in the lobby, and they were bringing in wounded soldiers. Evidently, the emergency electricity was working for the elevator, because they drag in these wounded soldiers in soldiers' fatigues, put them on the elevator, and they'd end up in the mezzanine a couple minutes later, and then we would start to hear these sounds where they were being tortured literally to death. Sounds like no one should ever want to hear in their entire lives. That was happening right over our head. We couldn't see them, but we could hear them.
They took our passports. They took everything.
This went on for a long time, and we knew we were in trouble. They kept bringing more Al-Qaeda and Muslim Brotherhood officials in to see the spoils. We were the spoils, you know.
They parade them in front of us.
And some of them were military, some of them weren't. Every one of them, to the last one, had alcohol on their breath. One guy that spoke real good English came in and started pointing his finger at each one of us. I know you were on the Shakir show. You worked with Gaddafi's son. You were this. You were, going around accusing each one of us. And of course, I was demanding that they give us our passports back and let us out there because we were Americans. And after all, the Americans had been helping us. They had no reason to be abusing us. Mm-hmm. And finally, after all one day, the next morning, this big, tall, fat, bald-headed, bearded so-and-so wearing a dress came in there, walked in, looked down his nose at us, and said something in Arabic, and then walked off towards the coffee shop. And, of course, JoAnn and I didn't know what he said, but the other people that spoke Arabic, they all turned real light and got very, very nervous.
They looked like mannequins. They were frozen.
A little while later, they finally got our passports back to us. They had wiped our hard drive on our computer. And so I was demanding that they take us. We now knew that the rescue ship, that there were 2 tugboats sitting there waiting for us. And I was bound and determined if we could to get to that fishing village and get on those tugboats and get to the salvation ship, And so when they gave us all the passports and everything back, then the driver, another man came from our hotel. He came in and told the driver that he was replacing him as the driver. And we knew this guy. His English was perfect. He was never very friendly, but his English was always real good. If we had a problem with our internet or something, he was real sharp to fix it. Well, I'm demanding all this stuff, and he stops, and he says, no, he said, this van is not going there. He said, the van's going back to the Corinthia. And I'm raising hell, and he pulls JoAnn off to the side. And he said, I know you all. Go ahead and tell him what he said. He
pulled me off to the side because Jimmy was adamant that we were going to go to the ship. He was angry. We'd been held there at gunpoint and threatened and interrogated and all kinds of stuff. And
I'm a Texan,
Anyway, he pulled me off to the side and he said, I need to tell you something. I said, okay. He said, I can still remember this like it was yesterday. He said, what your husband didn't understand the imam say was that when you take him to the rescue ship, they've set up a kill zone 2 blocks that way under the overpass. You're to be killed, chopped up, and burned, and it will be blamed on Gaddafi. He said, the reason I'm telling you this is, he said, I've watched you. You've been here 3 months. All you're trying to do is help the Libyan people, and it's not right that this should happen to you, so I'm here to try to take you the other direction. And he said, but we need to speak to your husband. And so I went over, and I told Jimmy, you need to listen to what this man has to say. Of course, when he told him that, he said, I guess we're going back to the other hotel.
Now, this guy was Al-Qaeda. He was their plant inside the hotel. That's why he was never friendly with us. But God touched his heart and had him do that. I'm telling you, if you look cross-eyed at Al-Qaeda or Muslim Brotherhood, they kill you. If they had known that he had told us that, then he'd have been finished. Yeah. So I said, okay, well, we're going to follow you. And he said, how much money do you all have? He said, because these guys are being paid $2,500 a head to kill you and then another $1,000 each to chop you up and burn you. So that was 7 of us, be $3,500 times 7. Nobody had any money but me, and I had about $16,900 left. I gave him all that money, and I said, go do what you can. So he went down there and negotiated for them to keep their mouth shut, really, because nobody would know that we were alive or dead unless they said something. And being paid, they knew they were going to get another shot at us because that didn't get us out of Libya. That just got us out of that kill zone that night. And so he came back up. We loaded up the van, and he went by back roads, sneaked in and out of alleys, and got us back to the Corinthia Hotel. That's where we had started, the day and a half, 2 days before that. And it was more than 2 days. And so we got back there. The first miracle had delivered us out of the kill zone. And then Fatima, too, said she had been talking with one of the men from Muhammad was his name, and he's Al-Qaeda, but he was she said, he's really not a bad guy, but he's the one that's coordinating the exodus of the refugees from Tripoli to Benghazi on this
UN immigration ship.
And she said, he said that he's watched you all and that he would like to help. He'd like to come meet us. So he came to our hotel, and he was really a nice guy. He said, you all are on the list. You're in a lot of trouble. He said, but I know you all are good people. I'm going to take you in my van to the boat. I'm going to get you through all the stop points. I'm going to get you onto the boat. And he said, then I'm going to have them deliver you to a hotel in Benghazi, because if you're taken to one of the refugee camps on the border with Egypt, that's where all these people are going to end up. He said, your names will be on that list. And he said, so I'm going to take you in my van and see that you end up in a hotel in Benghazi. And he said, there's a U.S. office there. There's a European Union office there. And I told Fatima, she speaks Spanish, and so do I. That's how we were able to communicate. I said, hell, that's the head of the snake. She said, no, I've been talking to my friends over there, and they said all the murders are over here killing people in Tripoli, and that Benghazi is basically empty. So good to his word. He picked us up in his van. He took us through all the checkpoints, got us onto the ship. Now, we'd lost one person, the gal that worked for the hotel. That first trip had been too much for her. She said, I'll stay here rather than try to go with you all again. And so we got on that ship, and then it was 2 days of the worst boat ride you can imagine. This was a converted car carrier, had 2 bathrooms. There were over 300 people on the ship. Oh, no food. There was some out of date fruit juice, hot water, moldy bread. That was all that was on the ship.
1,000,000 degrees outside.
And it was hot. No curtains or anything on any of the windows. Hottest part of the summer in the Mediterranean, and plenty of waves to keep you awake or whatever. And you drink this fruit juice, and then immediately you're doing the green apple quick step. And so, with 300 people in 2 bathrooms and sick and everything else, it was a mess. And so it was 2 full days, and we finally got to Benghazi. And when the ship pulled in, they brought dump trucks and threw everybody's luggage in these dump trucks, and then put the people in buses, and he took everybody but the 6 of us, headed them towards Egypt for another 18 or 20 hour tough ride. And we were taken to the Tabesti Hotel.
Yeah. 2 UN guys showed up in blue shirts, and they said, we're supposed to take care of you guys. So they did. And so JoAnn and I, as soon as we got there, we went up to the U.S. office in that hotel. The guy that was there barely even spoke English. We told him we needed help. We need to get out of there. And he says, I'm not here to help you. I'm just here to help the rebels. And we said, yes, but we're U.S. citizens. He said, I can't help you. I only deal with rebels. So he shuffed us off. We went downstairs to the European Union office. That guy was much nicer. He said, gosh, I wish I could help you, but you have nothing to do with the European Union, therefore, bye. And when we got back to the lobby of the hotel, the concierge at the hotel had looked at the 6 of us and decided that we weren't rebels and that we needed a little more help, And he called the ranking guy with the NTC that was left. That was the National Transitional Council, which was the phony government who was installed by the U.S., and the number 3 guy was in Benghazi, and the hotel called him. He sent his security guy over there to meet us. That guy didn't speak any English, but he was really impressed with the Bahraini prince. And so he called his boss and said, yes, you need to come meet these guys. When the boss came, perfectly dressed, perfect English, very spit and polished, if you would. And he began talking to us. And in those tribal cultures, it's really important that you try to establish some kind of link with somebody in their tribe or whatever. It's like if you know somebody in somebody's family, they feel more comfortable.
And we asked him where he was from. He told us which tribe. Well, it just so happened our best friends in Libya were from that same tribe. So I gave him their name and their kids' names and all that stuff. And he said, yes, I know them. They're okay. They're okay. They're not of the highest importance of the tribe, but that broke the ice. And he said, how long has it been since y'all have had anything to eat? I guess we were all, licking the floor. Been 5 days, and it was Ramadan. And he said, well, they will have a big buffet here for breakfast this evening. He said, I can't be with you. I need to be with my family, but I'm going to invite you to dinner at this buffet. And then he said, then I'm leaving my security man with you, and I've instructed him to try to get you on the plane that's leaving tonight, taking wounded military to Tunisia. And he will stay with you, and he'll make his best efforts to get you on that plane. So we did have break fast, and then the security guy took us to the airport a few hours later, and he put us at the front of the line, fighting everybody that's trying to get on that plane, you know. Got us our boarding passes, got everything cleared, and then took us to the executive lounge at the airport in Benghazi. And real nice, air-conditioned place, not any crowds around there or anything. He said it was better we were out of the sight of everybody trying to get on the plane in case some folks didn't get on that plane. They might not like the fact that we were getting on it. Might be trouble.
There was a plane, he said, carrying wounded soldiers because they were allowed to fly anywhere they wanted.
No-fly zone didn't affect them.
No-fly zone didn't affect them.
When you say soldiers, you mean U.S.-backed rebels?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. But that was a lie.
That was a lie. There were no wounded soldiers.
We didn't see one. But in this executive lounge, while we were there, another 8 or 10 or 12 people came in. Most of them officials of the new government. All of them spoke trash. They were either employees, 20-year employees of World Bank or IMF or whatever. None of them had been in Libya in their adult lives. So a bunch of them had been at Langley. You know, they were all shills for the Zionists. And they're talking this trash about how now Libya is going to really be developed and the Libyans are really going to have freedom and there's really going to be democracy. And I asked this one guy, he was going to be in charge of all oil and gas and everything. And I said, well, what exactly is your plan to go back and put all these wells back into operation that have been shut down? I said, you know, they got 19% paraffin, and when you stop producing them, they just plug up. He said, don't worry about that. We'll take care of that. So they had, you know, nobody had any expertise in anything. But long and short, the
plane was supposed to be in at 10:30.
Yeah.
We didn't at 2:30. At 2:30, we got on the plane. But it's interesting because there was no tower working there. There was nothing. It was dark in the middle of the night. They walked us out on the tarmac in the dark. We got on the plane, and the plane just took off as soon as we were on it.
Yeah, the plane, it was the most raggedy-ass old plane, old 727 you'd ever seen. It was made when Hitler was a private, and all the doors were missing on the, you know, the overhead storage bins. They were all missing, and when you looked down between your feet at the floor, you could see daylight. When the damn thing took off, it rattled and rolled and rocked and shook and everything, you know. But it was like riding on a
Well, the guy
golden carpet.
The pilot said, you know, we're going to stay low because there's a possibility we get shut down if they see us. So we ended up in Tunisia at 4:30 in the morning. And from there, we didn't get any help from the U.S. at all. The U.S. Embassy, there's no help. I mean, no, we called the U.S. Embassy. They said, no, call your family and see if they'll give us some money. We'll manage the money for you.
Well, it's exactly the same situation recently in Yemen. Well, there's a bunch of American citizens in Yemen when Saudi and the U.S. basically were bombing the place back to the Stone Age, and American citizens had to appeal to the Russians, and the Russians had to get the Americans out because the American consulate or embassy or officials were just like, whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah. And if you got money from them, they took your passport. You didn't get it back till you paid them back.
Jeez.
And they were going to put us in a hotel, a $70 cab ride from that hotel to the airport. We were a $3 cab ride where we were. And I said, this doesn't make any sense. So JoAnn's daughter actually bought us a couple of one-way tickets from Tunisia to Rome. And then we used our miles with British Airways. Once they figured out how bad a shape we were in, they were really nice. They got us a plane that night. They gave us food vouchers for dinner, put us in a nice hotel in London, got us on a flight out into Houston. And when we got to Houston, they let JoAnn go through.
And understand, I had an external hard drive that I had secreted on myself. And that's the way we got all our information out, because when we were captured by Al-Qaeda, you know, Al-Qaeda, they won't touch a woman.
Well, unless they're going to rape
or kill her. And they didn't touch me. They touched everybody else, but not me. And when I got into Houston, they let me go right through. I sat there with all the information they were looking for with Jimmy for 3 hours. The FBI interrogated him. I was sitting down in the luggage waiting for him.
They took my bag apart, took the lining out of it. You know, they had 3 screens. I was seeing the back of 3 screens, and the guy interrogating me was obviously getting questions from 3 different groups. He'd ask me the question, I'd answer the guy, type, and then they'd throw another 3 hours. This went on, and who paid for your trip? How did you get there? What were you doing there? Who paid for your trip? How'd you get there? You know, this went on and on and on. 3 hours.
But it sounds like you guys were braced for this kind of interrogation coming back.
We thought we were.
Listen, we
thought
were
they were going to say, good, we're happy you made it back safe.
We were so glad to be alive.
Right.
Listen, in Rome, I was at my nerve's end. And when the guy from British Airways, their executive lounge, which I was a member, wouldn't let us in there and was going to have us thrown out of the airport. You know, we hadn't eaten in some time. And I said, I broke down. I said, you know, please have a little milk of human kindness run through your veins and let us at least turn on our computer here and get on the internet. Let us have a cup of coffee and some orange juice or something. Please help us. And finally, the guy snapped and figured out we weren't bad guys because the Italians had let us through security. I told them what would happen to us. They let us all the way through.
We went the back way through security. We went backwards through it.
Yeah, and finally this guy realized that we really were in trouble, and he was a jewel after that. He absolutely plowed through all the red tape and got us out of there, and you know, God bless him. He really helped us.
So, I mean, the guys, the way you tell that story, I mean, with Al-Qaeda and, you know, being threatened with being killed and chopped up, and I mean, you tell it in such a just a matter-of-fact way, but were you not freaking out at any point? I mean...
Oh, hell, I ruined 4 pair of underwear.
Listen, I have... My memory is so vivid of it, it's like it's yesterday, because if you're standing with somebody in a dark lobby of a hotel room in a corner, and the guy says to you, if you go that way, you're going to be killed and chopped up and burned. It's like somebody poured cold water on you.
And you also got to understand, for 100 days, we had seen these atrocities. We'd already been through culture shock, through,
they chopped up,
you know, what was in our mind. What was in our mind's eye was terrible. We had seen it. Yeah, they chopped up a guy right under our hotel window, and we saw him cut off his head, both arms, one leg, and their knife got dull, and they couldn't chop his other leg off. Okay. And then the next morning, there were 38 heads lined up above his. I mean, we saw this with our own. We're witnesses.
What's really unbelievable is how evil those people are that we were funding and arming and training. You know, who does things like this? You know. So
the percent is forget ISIS. The real head choppers is the U.S. government and NATO.
Oh yeah. CIA and Mossad.
Every time we were told in Libya at one point in time, anytime you see someone's head chopped off, that's CIA method.
And you go back in history and look at all the times this has taken place. And, you know, the CIA, a lot of the retired CIA now are outing them. And they said, this is what we do. This is how we train. This is psychological warfare. We make it so bad to the people of those countries that they give up without a fight. The more heinous the crimes, the quicker they give up.
But let me tell you that after we got back, the story continues on forever. But after we got back, we tried to rebuild our business. We really thought we were just going to go back to our business. Little did we know that we'd been targeted and soft killed and destroyed. There was not going to be any more business for us because no matter what we tried to do, it was just turned down. Finally, I called Washington, D.C. so many times to try to talk to them about what was going on in Libya and give them information. Tara Dahl, who was the aide to Michelle Bachmann, called me back. She said she was very interested in what we had to say, and since there's a whole story behind her, too. She turned out to be CIA. She's the one who brought all the intelligence into our house. She introduced me to the first guy who said, you have to be, he was out in California. He was
a police detective on loan
to the FBI
for their terrorist task force. He'd been all over the world.
Yeah, and he said, your story is unbelievable. You should have been debriefed immediately when you got back. And you need to be debriefed. And so he called the DIA, who sent in, one of their agents, Eric Maddox, who came to our house. He identified himself as Kevin Davis to us, but his real name is Eric Maddox, and he came many times to our house.
What was Tim's name? Just so you all know, we give names. Tim Hunt was his name. San Francisco detective, piece of garbage, you know. And then Eric Maddox, who gave us a false name. And you don't come into somebody's home who's trying to help your government and give them a false name and play this game. Well, that's what he did. So anyway, I'm not happy about that.
When he couldn't, what he wanted to do was extract a lot of our information from us.
They kept trying to get JoAnn's hard drive.
Yeah, they really wanted that. He said, I want you to print it all out. If I pay for it, will you print it all out? I said, I can't print it out. A lot of it's video, and I didn't give it to him anyway. But he interviewed some of the tribes on Skype. They gave us
in our home. We linked up Skype with them. So
they gave us a test of 14 questions for the tribes. They said because nobody in our history of the military, we've never had anybody infiltrate into the tribes of any country. Mm-hmm. He said, and I think this is a mistake. That's what he told us. He said, but we don't know how to do it. We can't get into the tribes.
We have to prove that you're really talking to tribes.
Yeah, so they gave us 14 questions, and we had those questions answered in 24 hours by the tribes. And he said, my handlers are blown away. He said that nobody has this kind of information. Nobody can pick up a phone and get information like you can. But they were not willing to do anything to help us, to work with us, or anything. They became vacuum cleaners. They were just sucking information.
They would not help the Libyans either.
They would not help the Libyans. The Libyans said, I have the head. The Libyans told him, the general on the phone, I have the head of all the Al-Qaeda guys. If you will send your snipers in or your drones, we can get rid of all the heads. We can't do that. And he said, okay, well then just send us the weapons and we'll take care of it ourselves. And they're, it's against the United States law for us to give weapons to anybody.
Yeah, right.
It became a joke.
And here's something else. We gave them latitude and longitude of where the Al-Qaeda leaders spent the night. We gave them latitude and longitude of where they had dug holes and buried all their weapons stores. We gave them latitude and longitude of where their training centers were. In fact, the one that was the most damning is they had a brand new training center, mega training center out in the Derna area, far east Libya, and it had 1,400 trainees there all the time. They're rotating them, sometimes 4,000 or 5,000.
Going out into Syria, of course.
This is their brand new center. So we gave that information to Eric Maddox. It had never been given to anybody anywhere. The tribes' spies gave it, the tribal leaders gave it to us. We gave it to Eric
Google
Maddox.
Maps, they absolutely gave it to us.
Pinpointed. 4 days later, an alert comes that they're to evacuate that training center, take the weapons they can carry with them, sell the other ones locally. And when that happened, we told Eric Maddox, how in the hell did this happen? We give it to you, and instead of you all going after that camp, somebody in the government told him what happened. He said, well, agenda, this came from Eric Maddox, Defense Intelligence Agency. He said, agenda in the United States is being set by Muslim Brotherhood.
He also told us that the translators, he said, well, I met a lot of Muslim Brotherhood. They're pretty nice guys. He said, there are translators. So the official translators for the U.S. intelligence is Muslim Brotherhood.
Wow.
So
it sounds like Maddox took what you said and warned them.
Sure he did.
Yeah.
Well, not him personally. He probably ran it up.
He said, do you think you giving me that information caused that to happen? I said, do you think?
Yeah, I'm sure it ended up in the offices at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue.
Sure.
And the Muslim Brotherhood guy there told him to leave.
Well, so the next thing I get a call from Tara Dahl, and she said that the Blaze, Glenn Beck's organization, a guy named Joe Weasel, would like to speak to me, and they'd like to do a 2-hour documentary on our story because there's nobody escapes from Al-Qaeda, nobody, and lives to tell about it. So Joe Weasel called me and made an appointment. He was real interested in talking to us. He brought his, and 3 days later he showed up with his film crew, or his producers, I guess, to interview us. And he said he brought security for us because he said, you're in more trouble from this government than you ever were from
more danger
than you ever were from Al-Qaeda. And he said, I brought a lady here for she's someone I work with, and she's going to be your
interface for security, going to set up protocols for internet and everything and lay protection around us. Her name is Nikki Barakal, maybe. That's the name she gave us.
Yeah, so we talked to them for 6 hours. They took our story and said, wow, it's a huge story. They said, Glenn will want to have you on his show
and
at least
as
twice.
They were leaving, they wanted our entire hard drive. JoAnn gave them about 25 gigabytes of stuff that wasn't new. And they were going to come back 3 days later with their film crews. And we hadn't heard from him in 2 days, so JoAnn called Weasel, and that's a good name for him, called Weasel. And instead of him calling back, this Nikki Barakal called back. And she said, I've killed this project because you all are already talking to intelligence agencies. You need to continue doing that. And also, you need to forget about Libya and start your life over today, or you won't have a life. And I said, that sounds like a threat. She raised her voice and she said, "You stand down and do exactly what I'm telling you, or you won't have a life."
And that's coming from a journalist?
No, this CIA.
She was CIA.
And this is also the gal that told us
that we were targeted.
That when we came into Houston, I had been targeted at that. JoAnn and I had been targeted. We had been blacklisted and we had been soft killed.
She said that was where
and
they
she
got
said
you.
That's why you've not had any business opportunities. That's why all your bank accounts have been drained. That's why everything's happened to you is because you've been soft killed. And she said, you should be happy. All they did was soft kill you. And I said, well, what's better, what's worse than that? She said, they do a terminal kill. And that's when you just disappear. Nobody ever hears from you again. Mm-hmm. And I said, so we're supposed to be happy and thankful that we've only been soft killed. By that time we had sold everything we owned. We sold my antique car collection, our houses, everything. We'd liquidated all our assets. We had taken our 30 scientists and given them all a nice stipend because it wasn't their fault we went to Libya. If we had known we were going to be soft killed, I would have given them half as much. They would have been happy, and we could have had enough of a nest egg to really start over. But, hell, our business is great. Our technology is great. We were going to start over again immediately. Didn't happen.
So Glenn Beck has been compromised. That was real obvious.
Wow. Glenn Beck's a shill. I mean, geez.
Oh, no kidding. Anyway, but Dr. Jerome Corsi has been writing articles with our information for 2 years now, over 2 years.
He's worked on that daily. He's written 40 articles based on information we provided him. 3
of the documents we brought forward have been read into the congressional record. The big one is the one where Morsi came from Libyan Security, where Morsi was involved with the attack on Chris Stevens in funding and organizing it. And there's another document that came that was a big one that it's from the U.S. Embassy when Egypt took their country back from the Muslim Brotherhood, when they threw Morsi out. They went into Morsi's, of course, his desk and found a bunch of documents. One of them was a document from the U.S. Embassy where Muslim Brotherhood leaders had gone in and accepted or picked up cash, anywhere from $500,000 to $850,000 in cash, and signed their name for the money. And we have that list.
17 or 18 of them. And those guys were all arrested after that on charges of being spies for the United States. They just finished the trials. Morsi and 3 or 4 of the top Muslim Brotherhood leaders in Egypt have been sentenced to death. And the rest of them on our list that we provided them is they're going to be in prison for the rest of their lives. So, the information that the tribes have provided us has been actionable intelligence according to the agencies.
Yeah. Egypt, I'm very proud of. They put Obama and Hillary Clinton up on charges of terrorism at the International Court for what they did to Egypt. Mm-hmm. And they have the proof. Of course, it may never be heard, but at least they did something.
Right. That you're talking there about during the Egyptian so-called revolution as well?
Yeah, that was again no revolution. That was another false flag operation.
Yeah, it's when the Egyptians took to the street, 30 million of them, to throw Morsi out. Mm-hmm. And that's when General Sisi stepped forward and he said, I asked my people, what do you want me to do? Because I work for the Egyptian people. And they said, we don't want him as our president. He's already torn up the Constitution, throw him out. So he said he went up and asked him to step down. He wouldn't step down, so they marched him out.
They arrested him. Also, in his private safe, they found documents where Obama had gifted $8 billion, that's with a B, dollars to Muslim Brotherhood so they could buy half the Sinai Peninsula so that the Muslim Brotherhood could have a homeland.
So what's going on in Libya today?
Libya is listen, they have used so much.
A failed state right now.
Used so much depleted uranium that the incidence of babies with birth defects that are so bad they die the first day. 25% of all babies born now in Libya die the first day because of the depleted uranium. The incidence of heart attacks, diabetes, 405% increases. Every place in the country that you look at, all the kids and dogs glow in the dark from all the uranium. The country's destroyed. And the United States, they have so much oil production, so much capacity, and so few people that's still a place that the Zionists hope to maintain, so they'll have an oil and gas supply.
We're not talking about the regular Jews. We're talking about the Zionists. That's different than.
And they are trying like hell to hang on to that. So the United States every day sends in weapons and mercenaries into Libya, ISIS.
They're funding them through Turkey.
Yeah.
And in fact, the Libyan government or Libyan army fired on a Turkish ship trying to go into Derna recently, and the Greeks captured one with all these weapons on it, going into Libya. But the tribal military council is working with the Libyan army to take their country back. They're doing the best they can. Until about a few months ago, the UN still had an embargo on the Libyan army receiving any weapons. Mm-hmm. It's okay for ISIS to receive them, but the Libyan army couldn't. So that. And,
on ISIS, ISIS is a corporation started in Arizona by John McCain and 60 other political leaders from all over the world.
Oh, yeah?
And so that's who ISIS is. And was it last week the President of the United States went to Congress and asked for funding for ISIS, the equivalent of Social Security and health care, and to supply them with air conditioners and all the benefits of Social Security. He's asked that of ISIS.
No, of the Congress.
Asked Congress to give it to ISIS.
Yeah.
That's the President of the United States.
Well, Libya has 2 million in exile right now still, and these people suffer every day. There's nothing for them. They're just in Tunisia and Egypt and around, unless they had some funds or family to help them, they're really suffering.
Are these the people who are fleeing in ships to Europe?
No, those are immigrants from Africa. Those aren't Libyans. The majority, I would say 99% are not Libyans. No.
The flight out of Africa into Europe had been going on forever, and really Libya had been the buffer. Libya employed about 2.5 million foreigners as workers in Libya, and they really were a buffer. And that arrangement had been made and maintained by Gaddafi forever. And of course, when Gaddafi and the Libyan government went away, then those migrants were now just
a sieve,
Right.
They just continue to come.
Yeah, it's interesting that a little bit of truth just eked out recently in the mainstream, even from at a political level, where the Italian Prime Minister he's complaining basically about the immigrants from Africa coming in, because a lot of them are coming into Italy, and he's saying that if the EU doesn't do something about this, then Italy will take its own action basically, and there's going to be a problem for Europe. And he went as far as saying that this problem is really caused by EU participation in the bombing of Libya 4 years ago. I mean, he came out and said that,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's pretty sad what they did. Where are they protecting the civilians now? Because there are people being tortured and killed in Libya every day. The black cities, the cities of black people that were raised, 4 or 5 of them are just gone. Right. Those people are all homeless.
And those 128 mass graves, most of those people were black. We went to all the black leaders here in the United States and asked them, you should rise up against this happening. None of them heeded that. None of them did anything about it. It's a real travesty because the media owns.
Libya has one elected parliament right now. It's in Tobruk. And the reason it's in Tobruk is because the puppet government that was set up by the U.S. was full of criminals and ne'er-do-wells. The Libyan people for 2 years they couldn't control anything. They had no control. They used militias roaming the streets like gangs with guns to try to control things. And of course they were all thieves and rapers and who knows what. When they had an election, because it was demanded by the UN, well, there has to be an election in Libya because we put democracy in there. So there was an election. All the Muslim Brotherhood were voted out, every single one of them. There was not one radical elected, even though half the people of Libya didn't even get to vote because they were outside. Well, they didn't accept that in Tripoli. The guy who's the criminal leader there, he said, well, I don't accept that. And
because he's best buddies with John McCain and Obama.
Yeah, so he said, you come here. They started blowing up the houses of the people who were elected, and kidnapping their wives, shooting them. So they had to take their parliament to Tobruk, to the other side, to the east side of Libya. So they claim they're still a government in Tripoli. They're not.
Right. They're not.
The only government is in Tobruk, and it's still a very weak government because it's hampered by all the fighting that's going on all the time.
And the ambassador from the United States, Deborah Jones, the only person she likes to meet with is Al-Qaeda and Muslim Brotherhood.
The big Misrata militia, Libya Dawn, they call themselves, which is full of Muslim Brotherhood and Ansar al-Sharia. It's the people she works with all the time.
And she's been seen holding hands with them, which is a real obscene event for a woman that's not married to a man. Also, the U.S. found their way clear to appoint an ambassador for Libya. This is a Libyan ambassador to the UN. They appointed this Spanish guy, has nothing to do with Libya, and he's a big-time Zionist.
He's also Muslim Brotherhood.
He's Muslim Brotherhood also.
The reason the U.S. ambassador to Libya is only shaking hands with Al-Qaeda is because Al-Qaeda are the only ones who are going to be open to basically giving all of Libyans' oil resources to U.S. companies or U.S. corporations, right?
Sure. Well, that's a big part of it. But, the reasons, everybody looks at the oil, but that was the three reasons I gave you, the reasons to blow up Libya.
But they want Libya destabilized, because if the tribes get back in control of Libya, then they are back to the way they were under Gaddafi, because that's the people of Libya.
And you can't have a country where the people were enjoying the wealth of the country like what happened in Libya, because that would make the Zionist plan to dominate everybody not work.
Right. You can't have real democracy is what you're saying.
Yeah. And so, that's the reason.
Libya is a very strong country when it's Gaddafi made it a very strong resource for Africa.
Not for fighting, but internally it was real strong, well supported by the people.
That's the problem, and the real tragedy of it, or one of the tragedies is, as you were mentioning there, when you tried to get the tribes and stuff to kind of rise up and do something about it, it's hard to get a peace-loving people to fight, against this kind of psychopathy and head chopping.
But it finally happened. Let me tell you what else they did. This was after 9/11. The tribes put forward an official plea and offer to the United States government, Congress, and everybody. They said, if you will just stop supporting Al-Qaeda and Muslim Brotherhood and Ansar al-Sharia in our country, then we, the tribes of Libya, will clean our country of all these radical Islamists, and then we will join hands with the other tribes in all the other countries and rid the world of radical Islam. Made the official offer. Never responded to by anybody.
Right. Says it all, really.
Because that's never what the U.S. government wanted.
Never. No. But, the U.S. government has shown to everybody, the Pope, the last Pope, 3 times he made an appeal to the NATO and UN to stop bombing Libya, and he and Cardinal Turkson and another Monsignor, the 3 of them, would go form a peace committee in Libya, and they would mediate the negotiations for peace between the fighting factions in Libya. 3 times. One time to the UN and twice to NATO. The Pope made that offer. They never responded to his offer. So they're not just thumbing their nose at the Libyans, they're thumbing their nose at everybody, because the Zionists, of course, this 85 individuals own 70% of everything. So we're all their chattel, we're all their cattle, we're their slaves, and how can we possibly buck their system? They tell us what to do, and we're supposed to do it.
When we were there during the war, on July 1st, they had a rally. They had a lot of rallies for their government. And on July 1st, they had 2 million people show up in the Green Square.
In Tripoli.
And they had these events all over Libya at that point in time with the green flags and supporting their government. And we were there. I have the videos of us being there, talking to the people. I have all of it. This was never reported.
We were let into their control tower.
It was never reported by the mainstream media. They tried to say, a few thousand people showed up or 1,000 people. But when we were getting captured by Al-Qaeda at the very end of our stay in Tripoli, one of the reporters that was the guys who they took UK British reporters and had them interrogate us, which those guys hated it.
Before we were to be killed.
They said, I'm not happy about this, but I'm having to do it because they're making me.
Right before we were to be killed, they had a British film crew come in and record each one of us individually. Are you okay? Have you been abused? Are you in good shape? That's because after we were dead, they were going to prove that it wasn't them that did it.
But those guys, he told me, he said, I hate this. He said, I'm not, he said, these guys are dangerous. But he told me, he said, you see this green square over here where they have all these rallies and stuff? He said they have an exact mock-up in Qatar. Exact mock-up. He said, because I've been there, and that's where they film where the rebels are all shouting down
having
that
events.
never happened in Libya ever.
Wow. Yeah, the whole campaign, even before the actual fighting broke out, something just smelled off. When they were showing images of protesters, allegedly.
And claiming, well, the claim that Gaddafi was bombing his own people was just a carbon copy of what they claimed about Iraq, and that had already been discredited by then, by 2011. The whole goddamn world knew that the West had lied to us about Iraq, but apparently people have got a really short memory, and as soon as they dropped the same story for Gaddafi in Libya, it was like, oh, he's an evil man. I mean, I just really lose faith with the ordinary person in this world.
Yeah, if the lamestream media reports it, I guess it's true.
We could not imagine how in the hell South Africa and these other countries joined hands to attack Libya. And so while we're there, near the end of August, the plenipotentiary ambassador to South Africa, his name was H.E. Dangor, ended up in our hotel because all his security crew and everybody left. So we had opportunity to have tea with him quite a few times, had some long discussions. And one time I asked him, I said, why in the hell did South Africa join hands to go after Libya? Because y'all had always had such a good working relationship. He said, we had no choice. He said, your Secretary of State approached our government and said, if you don't join hands with us and agree to go after Libya, then you'll have rebels in your backyard tomorrow.
Right.
He said, it's like the woman had a whole closet full of rebels. She could drop down any place.
That's a threat.
Now then, I know that that's true because we're very, very close to some third echelon royal family in Kuwait. And in the early days of the fighting, we were trying to get the royal family in Kuwait to bring in some rescue equipment for Libya, and they agreed to do it. And when they tried to pass the money on for that $50 million worth of humanitarian aid, the Secretary of State told them, pass that on to Qatar. Qatar's handling all that. This Hillary Clinton. And she said, and since you're so interested in Libya, then you can just sign on to be on our side going after Libya. And they said, well, we're really not interested in doing that. And she said, if you don't do it, you're going to have rebels in your backyard. So she made exactly the same threat to two different sources that we verified ourselves. So, the thing that's different about us, this is not, the information we have is not third hand. We are eyewitnesses to the atrocities. We're eyewitnesses to what happened in Libya. We weren't supposed to be there. And then after they found out we were there, we weren't supposed to be out of there. This guy from the Defense Intelligence Agency one time told us, he said, you all need to be written up in the Guinness records because nobody gets out of Al-Qaeda's hands alive. And then a couple of weeks later, he said to us, you all weren't supposed to ever get out of North Africa. So we're alive. We've had divine intervention that has saved our lives. Our Lord has protected us. You cannot imagine. Since we've been here, one time they planted drugs in our car. We were giving a seminar for the John Birch Society in Houston, and we never saw the drugs, but we decided to go have the oil changed in our car and tires rotated. And that night when we were driving from Houston back east, the radar guns and two sets of Texas Highway Patrollers followed us. And then every 10 miles, those two would pull off, another would pull on. And JoAnn said, did they put the radar gun on our bumper? And finally we got out in the middle of nowhere, and they pulled us over. And they wanted to search the car. And I said, no, I'm not going to let you search the car. And they said, we're taking the drug dog, and if we find if the dog marks for drugs and you're under arrest, we'll tear your car apart to find them. The dog went around the car 3 times, didn't mark. So the guy went to the back window, which is real unusual, and started tapping the back window of our Sequoia. And about the 15th time he tapped and yanked on the chain of the dog went up and touched his hand. And he said, he's marked for drugs. You're under arrest. And they started looking in the car. Not much, kind of cursory examination, but the whole time he had one of these flip phone, throwaway phones in his ear the whole time. This is a Texas Highway Patroller with a phone in his ear. You can't do any kind of searching with one hand. And after about an hour, he and the other Highway Patroller had been under the car 15 times each. They were digging around this one corner of the car. they had JoAnn and myself separated about 50 feet on the other side of the bar ditch. I kind of sneaked over to her and I said, JoAnn, can you slip down there and hear what that guy is saying? He's got a phone in his ear. And she got down there, and when she got back, she said, he's saying, I'm there. That's where I'm looking. So somebody was directing him where to look. And 2.5 hours later, after they had been under the car so many times, their uniform was black from crawling on their backs, looking up underneath the frame.
He had a burner phone.
That's what I'm talking about. And so they finally let us go. They said, well, there's been drugs in this car. The dog marked for it. And I said, I don't guess so, because believe me, with all the hell we've been through, we don't speed. We never did any drugs anyhow, but I mean, we wouldn't drink a cup of wine and get in the car. And so I said, that's just not true. And so in thinking back, the only thing could have happened, they planted the drugs probably when we were at the John Birch Society giving the seminar. And then you never know what angels look like. When we had the oil change, the guy that did it had tattoos from the back of his fingers all the way up both arms. And when he was underneath there changing the oil and changing the tires, he probably found something up underneath the frame that he took it out and looked at and said, well, hell, this guy kind of looks like Santa Claus, and I'm taking this home with me.
Right, yeah. With the tip, you know.
So that foiled them. You know, they've tried every nasty thing in the world to make us, to either arrest us so they can turn us into their stool pigeons, because we're an asset to them. Like JoAnn says, the only information they get about what the tribes are doing come from us. So we're an asset to them. I don't think that's why they've killed us. They've threatened us 4 times, but they haven't killed us because I think they're getting information from us.
Last time they got really angry at us, they called us, it was a year ago, and they said 9 months after we put our DVD out, the intelligence agency seemed to find it somewhere. I don't know how it took them
They're
so
real
long.
quick, you know.
But he said, we had a big meeting of all of our intelligence agencies and watched your DVD, and you know, we've decided you're really bad people. You're
the worst of the worst.
You put our names out. You know, you've caused us to have problems now. Our names are out there, and our, you know, I have to sleep with my gun now. And I said, well, you know what? You know, you signed on for it. I didn't. I told the guy when he came into my house, if you want me to do anything with you guys, then you need to train us and pay us, because we're not intelligence people. Oh, no, we don't do that. We're not interested in that. You know, but he said, well, you know better than to put out Michelle Bachmann's name. I said, Michelle Bachmann is a congressman. There's no secret about her.
Obviously, there is a secret about her. And Tara Dahl is one of their up-and-coming spies, and they're real pissed that we put her name out.
Yeah, and she's tried to contact. She had contact with the tribes through us, and she's tried to contact them a bunch of times since then, and they won't speak to her. She's over there in Egypt from time to time wanting to talk to them.
But to satisfy everybody in your audience, know that what we've said is 100% accurate, as wild as it sounds. Congressman Pete Sessions, we cornered him in November of 2014. And after we talked to him 20 minutes, he verified through the Defense Intelligence Agency and then called the head of the DIA into his office in Washington, D.C. and verified. When he called us back 10 days later, he said, I talked to the head of the DIA, and he said, I want you to know that he said everything you told me.
And he repeated that.
He said everything you told me, blacklist, soft kill, etc., is all true. They have ruined you. They've admitted to it. And he said, but also the guy admitted he didn't know how 2 people sitting in the woodlands of Texas could pick up their phone and call anywhere in the world and get actionable intelligence like you 2 could. And Pete says, I asked him, then why didn't you make these 2 people your best friend instead of attacking them? And he said the guy had no answer. That wasn't 2014. That was 2013. Pardon me. And so we've been validated 100% by the top of the worst criminal cabal of intelligence in the world, the Defense Intelligence Agency, as being completely accurate.
He said our intelligence was certified as 100% correct. He said that's unusual. He said, but they did say that they'd hired you and that you decided you didn't want to work for them anymore. And I said, they never hired us. And Pete said, you never were paid by them? I said, no. I said, go ask them to show you a paycheck, a pay stub. I was never paid by him. He said, okay, this happens. Sometimes I have to go back. And so it's kind of dropped then. He went back, I'm sure, but they tried to say, I'm sure that, oh, well, that was a mistake. Somebody told us wrong. You know, they dance around in their story.
Right.
I
think the reason that they're not making friends, or they didn't make friends with you, is because of the kind of stuff you're putting out there, which is exposing exactly what they're doing, you know?
But we hadn't put anything out at that point.
You hadn't?
We didn't go public until
we were
Nikki Barakal threatened to kill us.
We never put out anything.
That's when we started going public, and that was 2 years ago, May.
Who threatened to kill you?
Nikki Barracall, the CIA agent that was brought in by Glenn Beck's organization into our.
Yeah.
That's when we went public.
That was the first time they threatened us.
That was May of 2013.
They threatened us one time. They called our Libyans. Somebody from the United States called our Libyans and said, you better tell your friends in the United States to shut up or they'll disappear.
Hold on. Let's just spell this out for our listeners here. Someone in the Blaze, which is Glenn Beck's organization, threatened to kill you unless you shut up.
She wasn't in the
That's
Blaze.
right. She was the security person brought into our home by the Blaze.
Okay, she tagged along, right?
Yeah,
they invited her.
They invited her, and she was supposed to put protection up for us because she told us that we were in danger of this government. Weasel, the head of the Blaze, told us we were in more danger from the United States government than we ever were while we were in the hands of Al-Qaeda. And that was confirmed by Nikki Barracall. Nikki Barracall confirmed that we had been targeted when we came back into Houston after getting out of Al-Qaeda's hands. She verified that we had been blacklisted and soft-killed, which we did not know until that time. The reason we couldn't get a job, I couldn't imagine why we couldn't get our business started. We got a great product, got a great business. We're both racehorses in the business world. And we were sending out, when we couldn't start our own business, I was sending out 30 resumes a day, and JoAnn was sending out 20. We never got an interview from anybody. I went to some headhunters and was offered 3 jobs, and then within a week the jobs were pulled, and the headhunter said, well, we can't talk to you, neither can our clients. One church volunteered to help us one time when we were so poor we couldn't pay attention, and they were going to pay our rent. We sold the house in the Woodlands with the consideration that we would rent it back so we didn't have to move everything out. We'd already sold the house in Portland. We'd already sold Arizona, moved everything in this little house in the Woodlands. And so the buyer agreed to let us rent it. And then a few months later, all of a sudden the agency that was acting as the leasing agent for the investor came to us and said, if you're 3 days late, we're throwing you out. You can't do that in Texas. But, we had no option with that. So when rent was due, we had to pay it. And when we couldn't pay it, one of the churches volunteered to help. And it's a big church, $33 million church, $3 million excess budget, called the Crossroads Baptist Church. When it came time for rent to be paid, they weren't around. So I sold some irreplaceable antique car repair tools for 10 cents on the dollar, paid our rent, and then a few days later we got to that church. They never would answer our calls. We finally went there, and a woman that was a volunteer receptionist that we had met several times, she said, oh, I'm so sorry about what happened to you all. We're not even supposed to talk to you, but the government came here and told us if we helped you that they would cause a complete audit of the church for the last 5 to 7 years. It would cost us at least $500,000. We don't know you that well. We can't afford it. Therefore, we can't talk to you. Bye.
Wow.
So how are you guys getting by at the moment?
We don't. We sell our DVDs. People make little donations to us. Our DVD is $15 plus foreign shipping is another $10. That helps us survive. We are homeless. We are living in a home that an older couple has allowed us to stay in. It's their lake home that they haven't used in years. It's run down, but it's got a dry roof, so we're here. We're out in the middle of nowhere. The agencies like that because anytime we move, it's easy to spot us.
You can get our DVD at our website, which is, LibyanWarTheTruth.com. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to say that again so people understand.
They can make a donation. They can buy our DVD, but for sure, keep us in your prayers because God has been our protector, and we've had the worst in the world coming after us nonstop. And we're alive and we're kicking. We're the thing they don't understand is really if they caused us to have an untimely demise tomorrow, we would be in a better place. And they don't understand that. So they can't threaten us with death because, they've taken everything that we had in this world away from us, and we were very, very substantial people.
Yeah.
And the thing I say to the audience is if it can happen to us, it can happen to anybody.
Right.
Well, these people are godless, so I think it's not so much that concerns them, rather that you kept yourselves alive by naming names and speaking the truth. You've got a bit of
that's-
light on you now. That's got you this far. But have you considered? Are you still in danger? I mean, are you being watched? I mean,
Sure we are.
how can you live like in that kind of atmosphere? Have you considered leaving the U.S.?
Because, well, we don't have the money to go anyplace, and they wouldn't let us out anyhow. We were on the no-fly list until Pete Sessions got us off that. He told us that he had gotten us. We didn't know we were on the no-fly list. But listen, we don't have money to do anything. We live literally hand to mouth. And we cannot get a job. Nobody can give us any kind of substantive help. You know, we
get most of our help through donations and selling our DVD. That's right now that pays our utilities.
Yeah.
You know, it pays a little bit of gas for our car and our food. And
we literally live on a few $100s a month.
But I have hope. I really do. I believe that when this regime changes that is in this country, and that, more and more people are finding out the truth about Libya every day.
Mm-hmm.
So pretty soon we're not going to even be a threat because everybody's going to know it, I hope. Most people in Europe know it. They really know it.
I think one of the things that kind of might protect you is the fact that Libya is just one part of the kind of thing they're doing, you know, and they're probably doing, I don't know, it could even be much worse what they're doing with ISIS and what they're doing in different parts of the world. You know, they've spread, these kind of people in power have spread themselves around so much, and they've got so many fingers in their dirty pies, basically, that, you know, Libya is kind of like,
just one more.
Well, it's one more, and it's still ongoing, but the Libya attack was like four years ago and stuff, and now they've moved on. So that might be a kind of protection for you guys, but, well, I don't know. I mean, the only thing I can say is, well, let me ask a question first. If you knew that what has happened in the past few years was going to happen, would you have gone public still?
Oh, yeah. Let me tell you what. The Libyan people don't deserve this. And the problem is, it's not just Libya. This is a worldwide problem.
Syria.
Right.
You know, there have been so many false flag operations. Listen, we have gotten our multiple PhD in the dirty tricks of the Zionists and the oligarchs. And, you know, they're a godless bunch, and they're blowing up countries every day. There's false flags every day. And either you go bury your head in the sand and say, oh, everything's fine, I'm Pollyanna, or else you wake up and know that like JoAnn and I take it as our obligation to try to help the world know what's happened, because we are first-hand eyewitnesses. Mm-hmm. And we were put there for a purpose, and God is protecting us, and we're telling the truth. And the people that hear us, hopefully they will step back and take a look at what's going on and say, you know, the Congress and the government of the United States is criminal. They don't do anything for the people of the United States. It doesn't make any sense. They got a 3 or 4 or 5% approval rating. There's a reason for that. What's wrong with our government? What can we do about it? Because I'm telling you, if they can do that to us, and JoAnn and I are both good people. We funded our own nonprofit activities forever. We didn't live a very exorbitant lifestyle. You know, we really plowed everything back into our business. We're good folks. If they can do it to us, then they can do it to anybody.
Right.
And the fact that we're speaking the truth, we have the moral obligation to do that.
You know, for me, it's if you were, say you were on the street or in a mall or somewhere, and you saw a person beating a child or kicking a child or hurting a child, would you step up, or would you just turn around and walk away? Because it makes you compliant when you do that.
Yeah.
You know, people have to stand up for humanity. Lives mean something. You know, it's for us, you know, like somebody said to me, my daughter said, why don't you just tell them you won't say anything and maybe they'll leave you alone? I said, okay, picture this. I see a mafia guy kill somebody, okay, and he sees me and I tell him, I promise I won't say anything. Do you think he's going to let me live?
Right.
Not ever. It's the same thing happened to Chris Stevens, you know. You either stand up for what's the truth and you say it and you take your lumps because you happen to be there and you are an eyewitness, or you know, you live with your head in the sand and you're abused every day.
About 6.5 months ago, we're on a dirt road for about a mile until you get to hard surface. And as soon as we hit the hard surface road, 2 black SUVs stopped us. They put JoAnn in one, me in another, and we drove for an hour and a half, blacked out windows behind. We didn't know where we were going. Went into an underground parking building. They took us up an elevator, went into some rooms, no pictures or windows or anything, metal furniture, and they proceeded to interrogate us for We were a total 32 and a half hours from the time they picked us up until they took us back. And the whole time they're interrogating us, you know, we can do this. They would never would show us a credential, never would show us an ID. We don't have to do that. We can pick you up anytime we want to. We can make you disappear if we want to, you know, all these threats. And it kept on and kept on. And we were told if we were ever put in that position, do not drink or eat anything they offer. Mm-hmm. Okay. And also don't relieve yourself. So JoAnn and I were cross-legged, you know, for 32 and a half hours until we got back. Now, when we got back, our SUV was in the driveway. That meant they had keys to get into this house. So, you know, the fact is, if JoAnn and I have done something wrong, then throw us in jail. If not, leave us the hell alone.
Right.
You know, we're telling the truth. We're not making any of this up. And believe me, if anything we said was not true, they would be tickled to death to throw us in jail and make us their puppets.
Absolutely.
So, you know, now we've got a tough. We're on the end of a little bitty branch.
It's like Snowden said. You know, he said, "How is it that the people that broke the law, and I said that they broke the law, now I'm breaking the law because I pointed out that they broke the law."
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's the same thing with us. We watched them commit war crimes that were unconscionable. I mean, in a world where you think people are humane people, you can't imagine the kind of things that we saw and heard and interviewed and eyewitness. I mean, we went to
one intelligence agency, one guy that was there as a personal bodyguard of another spy that was in there acting like she was a humanitarian from Canada. We were talking to him. He was a nice guy, and he said, "I didn't even know where I was going. I'm here, etc." And we said, "Yeah," but I said, "The thing that's real disturbing is," I said, we are finding, because JoAnn and I bought some meters to monitor the amount of radiation. I said, "We're finding that all these shells are depleted uranium." He said, "Oh, yeah." He said, "Any place in the United States is bombed." He said, they glow in the dark. He said, "They're all light up. That's all the weapons they use." Well, depleted uranium is a real nasty weapon.
It's also an illegal weapon.
It causes permanent damage to the soil and everything. You know, these are unconscionable acts, and they do it with no remorse or anything.
Well, guys, I think what you're doing and what you've done is absolutely commendable, and I don't have high enough praise for your moral fiber and your courage and your strength, and I'm really going to encourage all of our listeners to try and help you out, because it's the very least ordinary people can do, people with a conscience who support truth and freedom and are against the evils and the evildoers of this world. It's the least those people can do is to kind of help people like yourselves who are trying to really putting your lives on the line to spread the truth. So I just want everybody listening to consider making a donation and buying your CD from your website, which has all of the information in it, because it's a really worthy cause, probably the most worthy one I've heard in a long time.
Yeah.
Well, keep us in your prayers. That's real important too.
Absolutely.
You know, that has been the protection that's really saved us. And of course, our DVDs are 3 hours long. They've got a whole lot of information you've not seen from anybody. Mm-hmm. And donation would always help. You know, yeah. and of course, we were tickled to death when you invited us to be on your show. We really were hoping that you were going to invite us to do the show right there in your studios in France, but that didn't materialize.
It was a bit of short notice. It would be hard to get you here for, midday today. Well, maybe if you're ever doing a bit of traveling, you'd be very welcome if you ever get across this side of the pond,
Good deal.
We love Ireland.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we're not in Ireland anymore, but we got some contacts there.
I'm sure. We went and kissed the Barney Stone one time,
Yeah.
You couldn't tell that, though, could you?
No, not at all. Picked up something, definitely. Well, listen, guys, it's been a real pleasure, and I really hope you guys stay safe and keep doing what you're doing. I would love to see you get a kind of big budget movie made about your life and your experiences, but with with all of the truth kept in there. But maybe that's too much to ask.
It would be a better movie than Argo, believe me, because we never got any help from anybody.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, God bless you all. Thank you so much for having us on your show. And your folks can go to our website and keep us in your prayers. And if you can see it in your way to buy our DVD, that'd be great.
We bought it already.
Any donations are going to be great.
Yeah,
thank you.
Absolutely. All right, guys. Thanks a million.
God bless you.
God bless you.
Thank you. And to you. Bye-bye.
All right, folks, that was a harrowing story.
I'm speechless.
That's the real inside truth on Libya, and it really get a sense there of the nature of the powers that be in this world and what they're actually doing. Everything that's manifesting in the world right now in terms of the evil of this world and all of the head chopping and the brutality and evil that you see plastered across Western mainstream media, papers and on websites and in the news. All of that evil and horror that most people in the West want to turn their faces away from because it's those evil Muslims. That's the West. That's the elite in the West. That's your government doing that. Those images, those horrific images of, killing children, throwing people off roofs, cutting heads off, burning people alive. That is the ethos and the essence and the nature of the psychopaths in power in the West. Nowhere else. Maybe somewhere else, but primarily in the West, let's say. They are the ones, the prime movers and shakers behind why that is happening. So it's just horrible, and I don't know what else to say about it, really.
That's just one story. That's just a story by sheer chance of two people who happen to be in Libya, Iraq, Yemen, Syria. Yeah, you can multiply it many times, in fact, over decades, but recently it's just taken a whole new turn. I mean, this world just went to hell in a handbasket fast. Yeah, 15 years ago.
When you have that level of evil, duplicity, just pure lack of conscience and a pure evil and hatred of humanity, basically, because what you're seeing there is a hatred of ordinary people and a willingness to slaughter them and kill them in the most gruesome ways. When you see that happening and you realize that is being done by the supposed leaders of the free world, well, this world is not long for anything, really. It's going somewhere bad very quickly.
Yeah. Bring on the comets. What else can you say?
Yeah.
Experiment failed.
Yep. Well, we're going to leave it there for this week, folks. We will be back next week with an interview with the excellent Robert M. Price. He's a biblical scholar, and we may also have Laura on that show, so that promises to be a very interesting show, so don't miss it. Until then, thanks for listening and have a good one.